Part 2. Analysis of a few types of resistance. Chapter 3. Political resistance. The present volume consists of Amílcar Cabral's directives to the participants in a seminar of cadres of the African Party for the Independence of Guinea and Cape Verde, PAIGC, held in November 1969. We can compare our resistance comrades to the following. For example, a family, a village of our land, needs to cultivate rice. It has 2 wads of rice. It knows that if it sows these wads, there will be a shortage because the rice won't be able to be eaten. But the family scatters a wad, sows it, and if it works it well, afterward, 10, 20, or 30 of the same wads can be harvested according to the terrain. This is similar to the resistance of a people, comrades. We all had our life. Any one of you could have been in your house with your family, under colonialism certainly, but in your house, with your family. Others were maybe lawyers of the Portuguese, as there are other lawyers, doctors of the Portuguese, as there are other doctors, engineers, as there are others, farmers, carpenters, tailors, indigenous colonial soldiers, etc. But we decided to plant that seed in our heads, that one plants in the land, to give birth to new plants. A disaster can occur, of course. It cannot rain, for example, and all the seeds dry out. We lose the seeds, we don't get anything, and we remain hungry in the bargain. We can refuse to store anything of our labor, and plagues, birds, and monkeys can spoil all of the culture. The resistance of a people demands courage so that we can transform ourselves into seeds to create a new cultivated land that will thus give happiness to this people in freedom. That is the risk, the so-called risk of resistance. Some remain behind, but every day more must grow, and others will go to the front. And only those who will be capable of making their work grow more every day will win the resistance. The fight of a people, the resistance of a people, has various forms. As I already told you, our resistance began quite some time ago. Since the day that the Portuguese had the idea of dominating us, exploiting us, our resistance began in Guinea. Our resistance in Cape Verde began since the day that the social situation clearly demonstrated that, dependent on the Portuguese colonialists, our people in Cape Verde were exploited, humiliated, exported like animals, dying of hunger. Resistance by each one, as one could. Resistance in emigration, our Manjacos who go to France, to Senegal, our Balantas who leave from the Mansoa area, who first resisted and passed through the area of Baffa, Koya, etc. in the Republic of Guinea. All of this is also resistance, comrades. Resistance of one or another who has the courage to deal blows to indigenous colonial soldiers and is afterward beaten to death. Resistance of those who flee when the district officers call for them. Individual resistance in all manners and forms. But others also unite to make resistance on the basis of race, on the basis of local associative organizations of women, on the basis of families, or on other bases. In a land, resistance is only clearly defined when some of the people's children become cognizant and clearly understand the path that they should follow for resistance. Resistance is a natural thing. All force that exerts itself on a particular thing gives rise to a resistance, that is, a counterforce. And the counterforce to the colonial and imperial force is the movement of national liberation. This can only be resolved with political effort, or, in certain conditions, it can take the form of armed struggle, which is our specific case. And so, little by little, in the context of this general resistance, various types of resistance are defined. It's fundamental that every militant or leader becomes clearly aware of those types of resistance. But it's more important still to know why we resist, for what end we make resistance. We should know the objectives of resistance well. Resistance is the following: to destroy one thing for the sake of constructing another thing. That is resistance. What is it that we want to destroy in our land? the colonial domination of the Tugas. Only that? No. At the same time, we don't want any other type of colonial domination in our land, any other type of foreign domination whatsoever. We want our people to direct its own destiny through its children in Guinea and Cape Verde. That is what we want in the first place. But, on the basis of our party's life, we want to destroy every possibility of those who could liberate our land or any others, only to come abuse our people tomorrow. Our objective cannot be to go and tend to the governor's palace only to do in our land what the governor would like to do, nor with the house of the district officer or administrator. Our objective is to break with the colonial state in our land to create a new state, different, on the basis of justice, work, and equality of opportunity for all the children of our land, in Guinea and Cape Verde. We want, therefore, to destroy everything that would be an obstacle to the progress of our people, all the relations that there are in our society, in Guinea and Cape Verde, be they against the progress of our people or against the liberty of our people. At the end of the day, we want the following: concrete and equal possibilities for any child of our land, man or woman, to advance as a human being, to give all of his or her capacity, to develop his or her body and spirit in order to be a man or a woman at the height of his or her actual ability. We have to destroy everything that would be against this in our land, comrades, step by step, one by one, if it be necessary. But we have to destroy in order to construct a new life. This is the principal objective of our resistance. If we in fact want to liberate our people, we cannot accept all the abuses, all of the privileges of large or small groups in our land tomorrow. We are not going to liberate our people only from the Tuga colonialists, no, but from everything that damages our path to progress. We must destroy ignorance, lack of health, and every kind of fear, little by little, step by step. If today in our land, in our struggle, and maybe still tomorrow for a long time, we understand that there would be people afraid of a polon, for example, or afraid of animal horns sooner or later, when all our people know how to properly read and write, attend school often, and to really learn what fear is, what life is, what nature is, to understand what a pollen is, what lightning bolts are, what the moon, stars, and much more are, then we will have in our land the certainty that no one will be afraid of animal horns or of the wide eyes of the sorcerers in our land, comrades. When we achieve this, we will have truly liberated the people of our land, because the greatest pressure that exists over a people is not that of the colonialists, comrades. It's not a shortage of work. It isn't fear. A fearful people is an enslaved people. Fear of starvation, fear of not having work, fear of diseases, fear of a beating, fear of being deported. To São Tomé, fear of being unjustly imprisoned. Yet still more, fear of charlatans, fear of those who cast lots, fear of speaking with Moors, fear of spirits, fear of the dark forest, fear of lightning bolts, fear of lightning. For a people to have such fear is unfortunate, comrades. We're a people with so much fear, yet a people capable of taking up arms to fight against the colonialists, giving them a hard time in their land. Look at the contradiction that exists, comrades. That clearly shows us that we're capable of everything, and that's exactly the objective of our party, to develop all of our capacity. Our resistance is searching for this, to eliminate all that impedes us from having this capacity. Although today we still accept it a little. In our land tomorrow, we don't want children to be afraid of their parents. No, they should have respect, not fear. In our land, we don't want our children to be bound up in order to hit them. This is weakening our people. It's cutting short our people's path, comrades. We don't want anyone in our land to be bound in order to be hit anymore. Those who are criminals who don't care will be judged and, if necessary, shot, but not treated like dogs. We don't want human beings to be treated like dogs in our land anymore. And our work is to destroy, in our resistance, whatever makes dogs of our people, men or women, so as to allow us to advance, to grow, to rise up like the flowers of our land, whatever can make our people valued human beings. This is our work, comrades. If you won't understand this, you can't understand anything. That's why we sacrifice. That's why we're fighting. We should be cognizant of what we want to destroy and to construct in our land. That's the first circumstance for a resistance to advance seriously. This is why it's fundamental that we be fully aware of certain problems. For example, who are we? Who is our enemy? There is a lot to explain to ourselves, but we should know from where we're leaving, from what point we set out for this struggle, for this resistance. I already explained this to you here a few days ago, which concerned what we were before the resistance, before the organized struggle. And we have to clearly define the manner in which we make resistance, given the political, economic, cultural, and social situation of our land. Our resistance proceeds under various forms, comrades. First of all, and at the end of the day, political resistance. That is why we began by creating our party, a political instrument. But there are also other types of resistance that are fundamental elements of our struggle, comrades. Economic resistance, cultural resistance, and armed resistance. There exist at least these types of resistance, and we have to develop them more every day. Our struggle has been the development of these, even if we haven't been conscious of the fact. This is what the struggle has been, comrades. For this reason and from the very beginning, our party program clearly defined what the objectives were that we had in view. Fighting, taking up arms, and going on strike are too easy, but fighting with arms in one's hands isn't enough. It's necessary to struggle with political consciousness in one's head. It's necessary that we be aware that it's the consciousness of a man that guides the gun, and not the gun that guides his consciousness. The gun counts because the man is behind it, grasping it, and it's worth more the more the consciousness of the man is worth, the more the man's consciousness serves a well-defined, clear, and just cause. We have to clearly define our political consciousness, because the enemy exerts political pressure in order to destroy our political resistance. As much inside as outside our land, we have to clearly define our political resistance, what we should do. There is a lot we need to define. Whoever doesn't know that, if they don't know, it's because it didn't concern them to know it well. The first condition for political resistance, comrades, is to unite people. We already talked about that with the issue of party principles, and our political resistance was already in large part defined, to unite, to create national consciousness little by little, because we departed from a point in which we didn't have a national consciousness, in which we were divided into groups as much by our history as by the work of the Tugas, civilized and indigenous, people of the forest, Balantas, Pepes, Manyacos, Mandingas, etc. Our first task is to create a national consciousness, the idea of national unity, in a certain number of our people, as much in Guinea as in Cape Verde. For this very reason, our party was clear. National unity in Cape Verde. In order that we serve and unite all the people, we should seek the most that we can. But as I already told you, we must unite without opportunisms, negating opportunism, because our resistance isn't resistance in service of a clique or for making new bosses. It is not the resistance of Cabral who wants others to serve him. If I had wanted, in 1960, when I was head of all the movements of Dakar, I could have united all of them behind me. Likewise with our comrade Luis Cabral, when he left and arrived in Senegal, they reunited and posed a problem to him. Leave the PAGs, work with us, and become our boss. He responded saying that they shouldn't have told him that because he was with the PAIGC. Since that day, they were his enemies. Even individuals that hung out at his house before then became his enemies. We don't accept opportunism, comrades. National unity? Yes. But against all traitors, against all opportunists, against everyone immoral. We can't forge national unity with lying thieves, with criminals. We make national unity with a sure objective, to combat the enemy, to struggle against the enemy, but also at the same time to struggle against all the negative factors in our midst. This is a fundamental aspect of our political resistance that the comrades need to understand in its depth to be able to orient their work, whether as militants or as leaders. We need to remain vigilant in order that we not permit anyone to divide our people. As I told you, we have to clearly define what a people is in the current phase of our history. And I repeat to the people and to every child in our land of Guinea and Cape Verde who wants to run with the Portuguese colonialists, no more. He wants to do this, but he is of our people, and we don't want anyone to divide our people. Vigilance. Because the one who divides our people is worse than the Tuga enemy who will certainly go away. In our political resistance, we need to constantly elevate the consciousness of every militant engaged in the struggle or in the party. We need to demand of each a surmounting of his own work and thoughts. Only thus can we cultivate every value of our land, or what is of most worth, men and women. We have to struggle to apply the principles that we establish and about which we are talking here in order that everyone may have the possibility of advancing, whether men or women. Whoever refuses this is betraying and sabotaging our political resistance. And we have to organize again and again. That's why our party began organizing itself immediately, first clandestinely in groups of 3, in cells, in cities, and afterward in small groups in the forest, where it was possible to be clear-headed and necessary to stay hidden. Afterward, villages were organized, and we advanced little by little, forming party committees, zone committees, regional committees, and interregional committees. Little by little, we transformed our party administration, organizing it better at every turn and in accordance with the reality of our struggle in order to improve our political resistance. And every day, every hour, we seek to make clear the why of our struggle and what it is we want, so that everyone advances knowing full well what we're doing and for what reasons we're doing it. That's the necessary ground for us to be able to politically resist the maneuvers and propaganda of the enemy, and for us to be able to make advances in our political resistance, which is the fundamental resistance, comrades, in the context of our general resistance. We already discussed many times that every day we must instruct the masses of our land, telling them the truth above all, and never telling lies or deceiving anyone. We have no need to deceive anyone, and we're ruining our political resistance to the degree that we trick and lie. If there are difficulties, say it clearly. If we're winning, say it clearly. If we're losing, say it clearly. Because in every struggle, there are not only victories. If there were only victories, no struggles would exist anywhere. There are victories and defeats, hopeless difficulties at times, but we keep moving forward. We have to search, to instruct the masses of our land, clearly showing them the intention of the enemy and not allowing the enemy to delude them. This is a fundamental task for us, comrades, and unfortunately, some comrades have forgotten it. In the context of our struggle's concrete situation, in the context of the realization of national unity in Guinea, we should make more of an effort to win over our brothers, who some leaders turn from our struggle, above all, between the Fulas and between a few Manjacos. For these reasons, our party established an entire politics and distinguished between the population and its leaders. Treat the population well, take the high road, and don't do them harm. For this very reason, when we began the struggle in Gabu at the outset of 1965, we gave orders to our command during 1 month to not so much as hit the people of our land, who, deluded by the Tugas, had taken up arms against us. We spoke, we discussed, and a few comrades would even die without dealing a single blow. Comrade Lucio could speak to us about this. He helped. All this to win over others, to reinforce our political resistance, to improve our unity in the context of our action. In Cape Verde, while we know that our struggle exists fundamentally to serve those who are suffering, who don't have land to cultivate, who don't have jobs and are contracted to die in São Tomé, that our struggle is for those mothers who haul sacks on the piers of São Vicente, who die of hunger beside their children in times of crisis. While we know all that, we give orders to get the maximum number of people for our struggle. Even those who are on the side of the Tugas. To the well-employed children of Cape Verde, living well, we state clearly, the land is yours, Join us so we can advance. We do this because the first step of political resistance is to join together the maximum number of people possible for the struggle. It's the same thing in Guinea. Our struggle in Guinea isn't for me. From a material point of view, it consists in improving life. If sometime in my life to have again in our land, in Guinea and Cape Verde, the life that I had before. And even if the directors of our land tomorrow in Guinea and Cape Verde live as well as I lived in Portugal, this will mean that our country is very rich. We should be vigilant to not allow our directors to live like that because it is an extravagant life for a country that still has much work to do. In the first place, our struggle is for our people of the forests, people who lived for centuries and centuries in a village without knowledge beyond kilometers of their house, people who do not know what a school is or what medication can cure the illnesses that fill the body. Our resistance in Guinea consists in ending all abuse, as much in the forests as in the cities. We must end abuse so that the children of our land will know their profession as it should be, and so that no foreigner direct our land. Yet knowing this, or despite this, we seek to join everyone with us, people of all social categories. Even today, I tell you, as I told Jaime Pinto Bull, to leave the Tugas and come with us. As well as in relation to Cape Verde, I clearly told Julio Monteiro, Aguinaldo Vega, Antero Barros, and many others to abandon the Tugas and to take off with us, since the land is theirs too. We're not the only ones who have the right or the duty to fight for our land. Our land comes to all of us. That is the path of political resistance, for those who actually want to struggle or strive to serve their people and not to serve their stomach. In the context of our land's political resistance, we should do everything so that our land's forces are actualized for the political resistance. Our party does a lot. Maybe it could or should do more, but it has done much. And our struggle's victories, successes, continuity, and contemporary perspectives show us that our party achieved great victories in this sense. All the while, there are traitors in our land. There are still people who come from the Tugas, dogs of the Tugas in our land. And there are even still people among us who will head to the Tugas' side tomorrow because their ambitions, delusions, vanities, and vices don't permit them to endure the exigencies and rigors of our party's work. Political resistance also has to be great in the exterior sphere as well. In our conditions, the principal objective in the exterior sphere is to garner the political support of everyone in order to reinforce our political resistance. Our party worked and fought a lot to garner that political support as much in Africa as in the world. Since 1960, we of Guinea and Cape Verde have been lucky because I myself was appointed to begin denouncing Portuguese colonialism in the world by the votes of all the comrades of the Portuguese colonies who were with us. And it was in February 1960 that we held the first press conference in the international sphere, in London, unmasking Portuguese colonialism. Here we, one of the Portuguese colony's descendants, wrote the first pamphlet against Portuguese colonialism. It was published in English in Britain under the name Abul Jassi. There in the international and exterior sphere, our political resistance began to take form, still within the context of the Portuguese colonies, but slowly marching toward the context of Guinea and Cape Verde, that is, toward our party's context. The principal objective of political resistance in the exterior sphere is to win over allies, to win political support, and to politically isolate the enemy. That's why, from 1960 onward, while we prepared our people for armed struggle, we began frequenting international conferences and meetings, setting out the problem, fighting to be heard, multiplying our action, seeking all the necessary support, and wanting to isolate the enemy in the world. Another problem is how to isolate the enemy itself in relation to its people. Thus, since the beginning, in the context of our political resistance, we have remained clear that we don't struggle against the Portuguese people. Everyone in our party knows that. We do not struggle against the Portuguese or the Portuguese people. We struggle against Portuguese colonialism, against the Portuguese colonialists. We are fighting to clear out the Portuguese colonialists from our land. Yet we were even clearer. We in Guinea and Cape Verde, PAIGC, don't struggle against Salazarism or fascism in Portugal. That's the work of the Portuguese, not ours. That's the important point in order to isolate the Tugas from their own people. Within Guinea, we have been able to isolate them a little. We saw that, in the beginning of 1959, with the August strike of 1959, and in the Pidjigwiti massacre, some civilians took up arms against us, even though in the war, the Portuguese civilians didn't want to take up arms. Various civilians came over to our side. It's a great success of our party, and they know full well that we are not against them. This is what it means to isolate the enemy from his own people, from his own folk. And in Portugal today, day by day, favorable opinion of the PAIGC is constantly on the rise, comrades. You cannot even imagine the great respect for our party in Portugal. There is more respect for our party from some Tugas in Portugal than maybe from some of you seated here. You'll forgive me, but it's true. An everyday opinion against the colonial war in our land resurges more, because our party has been able to work on that aspect of political resistance that consists in isolating the enemy, distinguishing it from its people, and isolating it in relation to its people. It could be better, but the time hasn't arrived for everything to be very well. We defend our position in relation to the Portuguese people. We define the way to treat prisoners of war and to treat deserters in order to constantly win over the Portuguese people, cutting them off from our enemies who are the Portuguese colonialists. And today we know that the best propaganda already accomplished by our party, by our struggle, by our resistance, was accomplished by the Portuguese deserters, even by the Portuguese prisoners. This is one of the great victories of our struggle. There were even Portuguese deserters who, after we sent them away, wrote to us asking about the acceptance of naturalized children in our land because they wanted to live working for the PAIGC. That shows us how much success we had in such work. From the beginning of our struggle, even with documents that the comrades may recognize, we addressed ourselves to the colonialists of our land, telling them clearly, "You are the wheel of the old colonialist car that wants to continue exploiting our people. Even they have a place in our land if they want. We want to make a land where anyone from whatever part of the world can live, work, and live properly, provided that they respect the right of our people to direct itself." That was the first reason that demobilized many Tuga civilians and colonialists, to deny the colonialists' path. And there was a point around 1964, if the authorities would admit it, that they were all gone. But in the context of our struggle, while armed and in order to respect the correct form of our political consciousness, we refused every sort of abuse against the Portuguese soldiers. If one of our comrades one time committed crimes like those committed by the Tugas against us, he didn't obey the party's orders. In the beginning of our struggle, there were comrades who, in our resistance's general type of framework, suggested committing certain atrocities. But we refused that. In our struggle, there aren't those things that occur elsewhere in Africa, whatever the Africans' reasons might be. Killing women, killing white children only because they're white. We refuse that now and always. Why? Because we want to forge a political resistance to serve our people. We don't want our people to be bloodthirsty. We don't want our people to spill blood for the sake of spilling blood. Blood will be spilt, but in the political action that serves our land's future. Anyone we kill is killed because he has taken up arms against us, against the rights of our people. We give the order that anyone who took up arms but has deserted will no longer be considered an enemy. He is a human being who should be treated well. Fortunately, our comrades have known to respect this as it should be. And if one or another doesn't respect this, he is sabotaging our party's work, our political resistance. In the context of our political resistance, our work with other peoples of other Portuguese colonies is very important. We already told you that, of the movements of the Portuguese colonies, none tends to this as much as our party. From the outset, we always laid out this problem. We're only one, and we struggle together because the enemy is only one. There were highs and lows in other movements in relation to our conjuncture. There were betrayals in other movements. But the PAIGC was always loyal to unconditional solidarity with other movements of the Portuguese colonies, comrades. But there were still comrades of our party who posed the problem to us. But why should we support CONCP, the Conference of Nationalist Organizations of the Portuguese colonies, alone? We responded that we support it because it was in our interest. It wasn't only the interest of others, but ours as well. It was necessary to sacrifice cadres to work for CONCP since others provided no one. In a similar vein, against everyone and everything, we defended the necessity of joining all the students of the Portuguese colonies in an organization, UGN, the General Union of Students of Black Africa. Fortunately, our disciplined comrades understood this well. We only refuse one thing. We don't join ourselves to false movements in the Portuguese colonies. We don't join ourselves to movements that don't advance and that deliver themselves to the imperialists, because we don't want a new type of domination in our land. We unite with those who in our analysis show us that they're pure and have the intention to struggle properly. And still today, we don't regret this position. That, comrades, is one of the essential elements of our political resistance, our unity, our comradeship, our collaboration, and our intimate linkage with the liberation movements in Angola, Mozambique, and São Tomé. We ourselves, as the PAIGC, work a lot for the unity of the movements in Mozambique, for the creation of Frelimo, the Mozambique Liberation Front. But we of the PAIGC helped to form the MPLA, the People's Movement for the Liberation of Angola, in Angola too. There is no sort of vanity in this, and this is even publicly known. Those of Angola know it. In order to serve the interests of our people, comrades, we run risks in Angola, in clandestine meetings. At the moment that various Angolans were already prisoners of PID, the International and State Defense Police, it was necessary to go to Angola and assemble together. We arranged a contract as agronomists, went to Angola, and took the opportunity to meet comrades and to discuss with them the new path that we should all follow in the struggle for our lands under the control of PID, comrades. We did all this after the other tasks that we had already accomplished in Angola. For what? To serve the people of Guinea and Cape Verde, comrades. We were not delusional enough to serve the Angolan people, although from our human conscience, we would do as much as we could to serve in Angola and Mozambique as in Guinea or Cape Verde. And the only truly conscientious member of our party is the one capable of serving in any land, combating the same enemy. We always defend with the utmost force the necessity of the union between us, between the movements of the Portuguese colonies. And fortunately, after all of the difficulties, all of the problems, today we're all in agreement, and that's very important. One more large victory against Portuguese colonialism, comrades. And together we prepare ourselves to realize that dream of our party, which is to put all of the students of the Portuguese colonies into one organization. That would be another great victory in the plan of our political resistance, because the enemies of our people, of today or tomorrow, are also among our students, looking to conquer them in order to confound the life of our people. In the context of our political resistance outside of our land, we constantly reinforce and develop our relations with Africa. In the first place, we struggled with a great deal of courage in Conakry, for example, to win over the friendship, the esteem, and the solidarity of the Republic of Guinea. That was a fundamental aspect of our political resistance, comrades, and that achievement in that phase of our struggle was probably the best, most transcendent victory of our party, which means that it had the most consequences, even beyond what most can imagine. We dug deep and had patience, determination, and persistence in winning over the people of Senegal, despite all of Senegal's resistance, disavowal, and creation of movements against our party. And after so many years of work, we arrived at an agreement with the governor of Senegal. This is a great victory in the context of our political resistance, and one that we have to reinforce more each day. But we're already at a different level because today the situation is different. We've sought, in the African context, given our possibilities, of course, and insofar as we have time and our circumstances allow, to reinforce friendship with other independent African states. We have won over a profound friendship with a few African heads of state for our party. We cannot forget the profound friendship that connects us to Algeria, the United Arab Republic, Tanzania, and Congo-Brazzaville, to cite a few. We want to develop friendships with the Ivory Coast and Tunisia, and our party is still dedicated to advancing more in this area, with all the independent African states. This is an important task for our political resistance. And we have managed, through our valor, our work, the tasks and victories of our resistance, to win over all the peoples of Africa in the context of the OUA, the Organization of African Unity, and to assert ourselves, which is to say our party, our people, as the primary movement of African liberation. This constitutes a great victory in the political arena, comrades, in regards to our plan for political resistance. And we always work to reinforce our friendship and our collaboration with other African liberation movements. We have great unity and confidence in the movements of South Africa that struggle against colonialist racism. Let's not forget the movements of Rhodesia, of Southwest Africa, and, before they were independent, of Zambia and Kenya. I work persistently to collaborate with them, always consciously avoiding opportunism, knowing how to choose with whom we should form friendships. Because whoever does not know how to choose friends correctly, on the basis of a criterion that one respects, chooses partners in crime, not friends. And in our party, one of the most significant victories of our political resistance, through intense labor and many years, was to demonstrate the value of our struggle to the progressive forces of the entire world, principally the socialist community. We showed them the value of our labor and the seriousness of our party. While we were winning over their trust, their consideration, and, even more, their admiration, the point was, from our political consciousness and the victories of our political resistance, to gain their assistance in our struggle. Similarly, our party has known how to forge political resistance against Portugal's allied countries. We've never gone out to the outside world deluded that we were fighting against every capitalist country. We've never done that. We have combated Portuguese colonialism, and that is our task. We posed the problem clearly as much to the Americans as to the German, English, and French. We told them that we were not fighting against them, but against Portuguese colonialism. And if they don't join us, or if we don't obtain anything from them, it's not our party's fault. No, the fault lies with them, because due to their imperialist interests, they have their commitments to the Portuguese colonialists. And these interests carry more weight than the human interests they could have for our struggle. We've achieved victories all the same. We've already seen that Western countries sometimes abstain from voting either in favor of or against Portugal. That is already a great victory for us, comrades, a great victory. For example, we get to go to some countries and to conduct press conferences, to pose our problems, and we obtain, above all, the support of these countries' anti-colonial forces. That is important, comrades. As much in America as in England, Italy, France, etc., the truly progressive forces have a great admiration for the PAIGC, comrades. Only those who know nothing of our relations or of all the correspondences we receive don't know that. But ultimately, we obtained a great victory. A Western country that had dealt with Portugal in the commercial context has put itself entirely on our side, Sweden. And today, Sweden forcefully assists us. This year, we're going to begin to receive that assistance, not in money, but in goods, medicine, and school supplies. And this will help our people in the economic and cultural spheres. Comrades, this is a great victory for us and the opening of a great rupture in Portuguese alliances. Colonialist Portugal is quite aware of this and became furious. The Soviet Union assisted us, but Portugal did not become as furious in this case. Portugal protested, but not much, because they knew it couldn't be otherwise. The same happened with China and Cuba. Portugal knows that we receive arms and other things from Cuba. It knows that there are Cuban doctors who help us. It knows all that quite well. It isn't the time to capture a Cuban, and they know that. But Portugal didn't make the same commotion. It didn't become as furious as happened with Sweden. Just when Sweden said it would help us, the Tugas immediately became furious, called their ambassador, cut commercial relations, put people in the street to demonstrate, and prohibited workers from unloading Swedish boats. Portugal did this because it knows the force that this alliance represents for us. They know that it is a rupture in their Western alliances. They know that this can serve as an example for progressive forces, for example, from America, England, and France, that these forces can rise up and decide to ask their rulers to assist the African liberation movements. They have fear of that precedent, comrades. That could give you an idea of the great victory that our party realized this year in the work of our political resistance and in the international sphere. In sum, comrades, our political resistance should orient itself around three fundamental points. 1. To realize national unity in our land, and to place it entirely in the service of the struggle, in the service of our people, under our party's flag. 2. To isolate the enemy from all of its allies, from all of its collaborators, from all those who offer some support against our struggle without forgoing our principles. And 3. To orient our struggle in such a way, to work so well, that we should never forget that our struggle is fundamentally political, and that we must assure the victory of our political resistance. Chapter 4. Economic Resistance. In our afternoon session yesterday, we considered our resistance as a response to Portuguese colonial domination in Guinea and Cape Verde. We also demonstrated to the comrades what this consists of, namely, what are the principal aspects of our resistance and how. From the beginning of our struggle until today, we have followed a straight line in responding to the necessity of resistance in accordance with our land's concrete situation. Yesterday, we spoke about political resistance, and we saw that beyond this, there are economic, cultural, and armed resistances. Each of these resistances exists and has continued to advance more each day since we began our struggle, even if many of our comrades aren't aware of this. Today, we're going to talk a bit about another important aspect of resistance, which is economic resistance. As you comrades know, our struggle is a political struggle because we seek to conquer the rights of our people who should be free, sovereign, which means self-directing, conquering our land's national independence. But on the basis of this truth, there is the following truth. Colonialism is primarily an economic domination. Colonialism, or imperialist domination in the first place, seeks to dominate other peoples economically. To this end, it redoubles political domination and prolongs the forces of the imperialist or colonial state in our land, which it wants to dominate economically. For this very reason, we should say that the first objective of our resistance and struggle, at bottom, is to liberate our land economically, although beforehand, we have to pass through political liberation. This means that a land is only truly liberated if it manages to throw off foreign domination of a country's economy. If we in fact manage to liberate the economy of our country from all foreign exploitation. This is liberation of a land dominated by colonialists. This means that every land has its natural resources and its population, which is a land's greatest richness. The population, to the extent that it develops its capacity for labor, for production of its already real or potential natural riches, and for the means of production. All of this is subordinated to imperialist domination, isn't free, and doesn't develop freely in the epoch of colonial or imperial domination. To actually win independence consists in being able to freely develop that set of things called the productive forces of a land. Therefore, you see that, at bottom, our resistance functions to resolve an economic problem, although it has to pass through politics, and politics is always very important. This is the great importance of our economic resistance. As I told you before, every struggle, and principally our struggle for liberation, has two aspects that should always be held together: destruction and construction. We saw this clearly in political resistance. We have to destroy the Portuguese state. We have to destroy the political ideas that the colonialist Tugas put in our people's heads. And we have to destroy or surpass, furthermore, the political misconceptions that might exist in the heads of our people, our population, the classes and ethnic groups of our land, since these misconceptions can be harmful to our people's advance along the path of progress. We need to construct a new state in our land based on our people's freedom, on democracy, and on work for progress. We have to construct our people's national consciousness, constantly developing our population's political consciousness. We have to construct all of the political means, political systems, and necessary political organizations in order to defend the conquest of our national liberation. Economic resistance also involves destruction and construction. Our objective in economic resistance is to destroy the exploitation of our people by the Portuguese colonialists. This means that from the outset our struggle had to be guided down the path of completely stopping the Portuguese colonial regime's exploitation in our land. We know that exploitation in our land operates principally through the almost forced acquisition of the agricultural products from our people in Guinea and through the prices established by dealers of the colonial state. Through the obligation to cultivate peanuts in our land, which are bought at an established price by the Tugas, who exploit our people, considered in conjunction with serious economic calculations regarding the cultivation of peanuts, we arrive at the conclusion that this is forced labor. We arrive at this conclusion because for a family that cultivates however many acres of peanuts, what it gathers and sells and the money received at the end of the day do not suffice to pay a salary. Even less can this support the people of a family during a work year. In other words, we reach the conclusion, for example, that our people worked for free for the Casa Gouveia, Casa Ultramarina, and other traders that buy peanuts, because it is certain that the money earned by means of peanuts is used to pay the family tax, to get some fabric for one's wife, or to buy something else small. But if one did the math correctly, we see that in agricultural exploitation, this money earned does not pay the price of those peanuts' cost, including salaries and other relevant expenses. Well, this is what we want to destroy. We had to destroy this. We had to destroy those exploitative economic relations of the colonialists over our people. And we also had to destroy other bases of economic exploitation. Despite having taken on an administrative air, for example, the payment of unjust duties and various types of taxes on our people by the Portuguese colonial state. Our objective in Cape Verde is primarily to destroy the exploitation of our people by the regime of great estates that don't give land to our people. Our people have to be tenants, whether they produce or not. They have to pay rent, living in misery, submitted to hunger, and even subjected to being sold or contracted as forced laborers for other colonies. We should destroy this. We have already been able to destroy much in Guinea, and there are still days, for example, such as those when Guinea-Bissau announced that a Greek ship with 3,000 tons of rice arrived in our port. So we already see in this a bit of the colonial regime's destruction because, as we know, our people were practically forced to sell the rice they produced to Ultramarina to then be shucked and sold to the population. But now, the Tugas have to import rice. In the last year, they imported more than 10,000 tons of rice from Brazil alone, and this year, they have already received 3,000 tons. And whoever follows the official statistics will see that the exportation of peanuts fell greatly. There is practically no exportation in our land today. Ships come with war materials, with provisions for troops, or with goods for the cities, and return almost empty. They return principally with truck scraps or other materials that our combatants destroyed. So we have already in large part destroyed, and we have to completely destroy, the entire colonial Portuguese economic system in our land. In order to construct what? We now have to begin to construct our own economy. And for some years here, we have begun to struggle very well in the political and military spheres. But a people cannot struggle seriously without satiated stomachs and good health. That's also a form of resistance. To actually resist without food or health is not possible. For that reason, we have to develop our economy. to see the best way to make our economy advance, even during the struggle, and to guarantee the minimal conditions so that we can guarantee the means of existence for our people and our combatants. And we have to pull together to improve the conditions of our people little by little, so that they feel that it's in fact worthwhile to sacrifice oneself in the struggle for our land's independence under our party's flag. To the extent that our party will be capable, without us militants, leaders, combatants, and directors, to better our land's conditions of existence little by little, to demonstrate clearly that misery can end, to convince everyone in his or her conscience that if today there is misery, tomorrow it will end, and that this depends on our own labor, then we will be advancing in our struggle. This is because the one who trusts today, although he has nothing, if he labors well, tomorrow will have something. This person isn't wretched, but already rich because he trusts and knows that the path is open. We have to do this most of all, because we know that everyone who is in a miserable situation is easy prey and is easily caught up by the enemy against the interest of our people. It's enough for us to remember, for example, to make a ratio between the following. Which people in our land serve the Tugas most? Among people who have means and those who don't have means, where are there most servants of the Tugas? We see that it's among those who have had lesser means that there are more servants of the Tugas. Even in Bissau, we see that the Tugas recruited many of their agents for PID, International and State Defense Police, from among the unemployed, the idlers, etc. Faced with the necessity of our economic resistance, we have to pose a question clearly. What does our enemy do to destroy our economic resistance? Our enemy isn't fighting against us only with weapons, but also fighting against us economically. On one hand, in the sites where it still commands, the enemy struggles greatly for economic development, saying that life will improve, giving employment to people to see if life will actually improve, looking for balanas one to cultivate, managing goods, etc. For example, everyone knows that in Cape Verde, more merchandise and good things are arriving there now than ever. This is to avoid that continuous shortage that usually exists for nourishing revolts. Likewise, in Guinea today, various things that the Tugas bought from us before, for example rice, they now buy for significantly increased prices. This is in order to liquidate our economic resistance. The colonialists spread propaganda that they are providing large balanhas in the area of Teet, the island of Bissau that is almost entirely transformed into these balanhas, and are thus seeking the best way to economically elevate the managed region. They do so to ensure the people that life is improving and that it's not necessary for them to unite with those who are struggling. On the other hand, the Tuga makes an effort to completely destroy the economy that serves as the basis of our struggle. Bombings, napalm, assaults with helicopters to terrorize our population, so that our population even abandons our country for Senegal or for the Republic of Guinea. For the Tugas, this is all the better, because then that population doesn't work in our liberated areas, which would give us those necessary means to bear the struggle. But if that doesn't come to pass, if the population hides itself, not accepting what it wants, then they burn our crops in our villages, destroy everything, kill our cows or whichever animal gets in their way, and they'll kill you. And as the criminals that they are, they kill our population, children, women, the elderly, and countless able-bodied men. All that isn't only for the sake of war, no, but to destroy, to finish off our economic resistance, because the Tugas know, as do we, that if we didn't have an economy, if we didn't have economic means within our land to sustain the struggle, if we didn't have food or the possibility of acquiring food for our people and our combatants, then there couldn't be a war. There couldn't be a struggle, comrades. The enemy, therefore, does all that it can, and even in regard to medications and other woven things that we get for our people, for our people's depositories, for the hospitals, etc. The enemy makes an effort to finish off and destroy this. One of the enemy's great losses in the economic sphere consists in the fact that we have been able to install people's depositories in a few areas, bringing fabric, shoes, and other things that our people need. The Tugas' desire is to discover this in order to burn it as quickly as possible. This is because he knows that it's an economic force of ours, and that it always appears as a new political force in the context of our struggle. In order to avoid our economic resistance, the Tugas are eager to burn our land completely, if necessary, to deploy scorched earth policies, to reduce everything to ashes, only in order that we not succeed in our struggle. Therefore, we have to be vigilant in this regard, and we have to know full well what we should do in the face of the Tugas' criminal intentions, which have been demonstrated in a few areas of our land. Our economic struggle must be serious. That's why, since the outset, our party has considered and sought to construct a program for our economic resistance. Of course, we have to adapt it to our conditions in the best way. And we should mobilize all of our forces for our economic resistance, especially the forces of our population and of our militants in villages and in our liberated areas. At the same time, we should continually reinforce the destruction of our enemy's colonial economy, while also making insurance plans to increase our production, as much in agriculture as in handicrafts. We should seek to destroy the economic means of the enemy, their cars, factories, storehouses, depositories, ships, and roads, in order to completely cut off their economic exploitation in our land. You comrades saw that we even began with the sabotage of roads, bridges, and many other things. That was the first act of economic resistance, which is also political and military, that we mobilized against the colonial enemy. And in a given area, if the enemy had settled down in such a way that only if we burned everything could we make the enemy leave, we have the right to do so, because the land is ours. It's preferable to completely burn an area, to throw out the Tugas, and afterward, to work to reconstruct it, than to not deal with them, the Tugas remaining there eternally, dominating our people. We have to be aware of this. Although in our struggle, we have to establish tactics in such a way that we would be able to reduce the need to destroy things to a minimum, since even under colonial domination, it was our people who made such things. That, by the way, has been the policy of our party. We should comprehend, in the work of our party, the great need to destroy all of the Tugas' means of supplying provisions. That's why we insisted so much on attacks on ships on the rivers and trucks on roads, because ships and trucks furnish the war, but they also serve the enemy's economy. To the extent that we attack ships and trucks, we attack the enemy, as much from the military point of view as, and this is very important, from the economic point of view. We should do as much as possible in our land, in our struggle, as we have tried to do. But we should grow stronger every day to elevate our economy, even in war. But we should elevate it to improve the living conditions in our land, and we should make the greatest possible effort so that every day we can depend less on things that come from outside our land, that is to say, in order to look for ways to be self-reliant. Our party gave important watchwords in order to develop our agriculture, to improve our production, to increase our agricultural production, to make other things like handicraft works, even to make more soap in our land, and to seek to develop all of the home-based industries of our population. All of this is in the watchwords of our party. For what? To see if we're self-sufficient. Clearly, our land has special conditions, unfortunately, that greatly limit the possibilities of our labor in this field. Our land has been very behind economically, so behind that, we have had a fair amount of success in being able to apply these fundamental principles of our economic resistance. But this is no reason not to do the most we can. We can't pretend, for example, to rely entirely on the woven materials that our people have been accustomed to buying. Shoes, necklaces, let's say, needles, sewing machines, etc., or those things that form part of our people's everyday needs created from all of this time of colonialism. We can't rely on these things alone because there aren't factories in our land to produce such things. There are many agricultural cultures that never made such things, and we cannot rapidly make them in the midst of this war either. But we should be capable of beginning to make a few of them. We can't pretend to be self-sufficient in medical matters, not even simple medicine. But there are, in fact, things that we can do. For example, increase the production of rice, increase the production of manioc, potatoes, and other foods, and guarantee production in all of our land's areas that we control. We must greatly increase production. That we can do. And given our conditions of struggle, it's a fundamental basis for our economic resistance. We should also, as I've already mentioned to you, seek to develop our handicrafts, jars, mats, clothes, bands, etc. Our party has worked a bit in this area, but it hasn't accomplished what it wanted. This is because, in the thick of war and with our land's conditions, some party leaders forgot the relevant watchwords: to develop and increase production, to multiply, diversify, and vary our land's agricultural products. Of course, we have achieved some successes. There were areas in which more manioc was produced than before, more potatoes than before. But we must recognize that this is far from being what it could be. If it's true that in some areas, such as Quinara, for example, former populations didn't cultivate anything but today do so, it's also true that today other areas in which the population cultivated a lot cultivate less due to the war. The flight of a great number of our land's people for Senegal was, is, and continues to be a large blow to our economic resistance. It's a great blow to our economic resistance because all of those people are arms capable of working in the conditions of our liberated regions, and now they're going to work in Senegal, increasing Senegal's economy and diminishing our economy and economic resistance confronted by the Portuguese colonialists. We should say clearly that, at all levels, some of the directors and leaders of the party haven't put enough emphasis on our economic resistance. We always say that it's not only necessary that our people work, that the population work to produce, but that the combatants should also work to produce. We must mobilize all forces during the rain season so that the population works more, and so that the combatants and militiamen cultivate. This was possible in a few areas, but in other areas we should recognize that even the combatants who don't have much work to do, because the areas are liberated, don't cultivate, just wait for the population to feed them. And we have reached a point in some areas today, because of the shortage of rain in the last year, for example, that the population can't provide food, the combatants didn't cultivate anything, and they have to ask the party management to send them food. We should clearly tell our comrades that if we have to nourish our comrades deep in the forest of our land in order to be able to fight against the Portuguese colonialists, then the Portuguese colonialists will remain in our land another 100 years. That would be the result, above all, of the lack of responsible comrades who were incapable of getting the combatants to cultivate at the most necessary time. There are still combatants who don't even help the population as we said that they should. In the context of our economic resistance, we should orient our labor in such a way as to guarantee the war economy in order to secure essential goods and supplies for our struggle's fronts, for our combatants, and for our people. Unfortunately, we have great difficulties in obtaining essential goods because, given our land's basic conditions in which we destroy bridges, roads, etc., we don't have sufficient money, we don't have cars, nor is it possible to use cars today. And we can't establish the foreign trade that would allow us to buy things with the products that we sell abroad. Because of this, our population's supply of essential goods depends fundamentally on the gifts or donations that our allied friends send. At the same time, we should, as I told you, each day try to develop more respect for those who work, greatly raising the value of labor, convincing our land's children that working the earth shouldn't be disdained. On the contrary, it's the most pure, healthy, and valuable work in our land today. Unfortunately, many Africans have it in their heads that working doesn't count for much, working the earth only to extract things to eat even less so, because this is the work of the wretched. But in the context of our economic resistance, we must be capable of accomplishing great political work in order to constantly convince our people, our population, and every one of us that tilling the earth and cultivating plants isn't only for eating, but so that we can have many products to export, to sell, and to transform into other products. This is the most important, dignified, and elevated work in our land, comrades, whether in Guinea or in Cape Verde. In the context of our economic resistance, we have to be capable today, and even more so tomorrow, of leading every social layer of our land, every ethnic group in Guinea, every race, as we're accustomed to saying, to produce more and to multiply production. We can't allow that an ethnic group of our land produces only rice. It must produce rice, corn, beans, peanuts, etc., including vegetables and other things, because it's necessary to improve our people's level of nourishment. Our land's entire population can produce everything, and we must do this and develop every type of cultivation everywhere in order to improve our people's level of production. And little by little, we have to stimulate, which means to excite or to give courage to, those who are most valuable so that they will constantly continue to produce more. We should cultivate our friendship, affection, and dedication so that the children of our land who we see cultivating their balanhas with enthusiasm and dedication should have their name raised high, and we should offer them as an example to our land's other children. Little by little, we have to establish every way of resolving the problem of our land's small farmers tomorrow, because due to economic delays, Guinea doesn't yet truly have small farmers. In Cape Verde, the problem is different, because though there are many small farmers, there aren't as many as desired, because the majority are sharecroppers or partners. The fundamental problem consists in guiding people to labor together in these conditions. In Guinea, little by little, we have to be capable of creating cooperatives, increasing, in the first place, the cooperation between families, and searching tomorrow for the best militants to stick together in the cooperatives in order to develop the cooperative system, which, as our idea, is the shortest path to develop our agriculture and our economy in our land tomorrow. And right now, we should begin with experiments vis-a-vis the colonial state's former properties. That's why our party gave orders that those estates or gardens abandoned by the enemy or by those of our land who fled the war should be directed by our own party, by committees named by our party to manage them. We should confess that in the majority of cases, our leaders and comrades didn't attach as much importance to these works or to the party's watchwords as would have been good. In large part, even today, the possible yield to be extracted from these gardens and estates isn't extracted, nor are they kept in the proper condition. Some of them are abandoned, full of straw. The plants disappeared and decomposed, beyond those that the Tugas themselves shelled with bombs, destroying our fruit trees and other things that were there. In the context of our struggle, we have to get the principal aspect of our economic resistance clearly into our heads. As you all already know, in the specific case of our economic resistance, it's agriculture. We have nothing more in our land. It's agriculture today, agriculture tomorrow, and maybe still agriculture later on. Right now, we have to make the greatest effort to advance with our agriculture, elevating the political consciousness of our farming comrades, of our tilling patricians, showing them that the path of agriculture is the primary path for success and for our people's immediate advancement. But it's also the path that can open the opportunity of developing industry tomorrow for our people, creating an elevated living situation. But in the first place and in the midst of our African life, we have to extract the rightful yield from our agriculture, which still today is an agriculture economically behind. Our agriculture is simply one of subsistence. Everyone produces merely that which is necessary for one's own family to eat. Agriculture without any parsimony, without the ability to save for tomorrow, sometimes not even saving enough for the sowing season. And in the colonial context, agriculture is purely for the exchange economy with the Tugas who exploit our people. Producing peanuts, gathering coconuts, wax and honey to exchange with the Tugas, or selling rice, and that's all. The money is consumed, and every year our land's children, farmers, are in the same wretched situation at the beginning of the year. They don't advance at all. This is characteristic of our agriculture. In other lands, certain persons said that agriculture was the art of becoming poor, but happily without a care. In our land, agriculture might be the art of remaining poor for all of one's life. if we didn't in fact change our land's type of agriculture, if we didn't make a true revolution. In our land's economic sphere, which has very good conditions for agriculture, as much in Guinea as in Cape Verde, despite there being periods of drought in Cape Verde, there is no reason whatsoever for agricultural disaster in our time, with so many of today's conquests in science, which should be at the disposal of all of the world's people. Only after advancing well, and in fact with our agriculture, can we extract proper yield from our land. We're certain that there are lands of ours that can produce 2, 3, 4, or 10 times what they produce today if techniques were improved, if they selected seeds, if they took care of plants properly, if they worked really well. Many of our lands, if they had compost or fertilizer, and if they joined agriculture with raising cattle as they should, would then allow us to increase our production in an extraordinary manner. And within the agricultural context, we can do all of this, that is, greatly increase the production of cattle, livestock, and poultry of any breed. This is possible by really working with willpower, if we in fact really dedicate ourselves, and if everyone dedicates herself or himself to labor with willpower. We can't advance in our land if we raise chickens in the forest and gather them only when it's necessary to eat or to sell them. That's not raising chickens, it's collecting chickens, like those who collect palm nuts or bellows in the forest. We have to really improve all of this in order to be able to think about making our land advance in other spheres, in the industrial sphere, for example. And we should put the problem as concretely as possible in Guinea as in Cape Verde. Ranching, that is, cattle breeding, can be a large and important source of wealth, comrades. In the context of Africa in general, Guinea is a land that has one of the greatest densities of cattle. But Cape Verde, despite its droughts and occasional shortage of rain, still has possibilities today of exporting leather and hides, as much to Portugal as to other places. So we're seeing that right now, we should orient our life along this path. It's exactly from, on the side of, and for agriculture that we are able to advance and to develop our cattle breeding. Unfortunately, due to this war and during our struggle, we haven't given due attention to this work. We haven't controlled our wealth in cattle. A large part of our wealth in northern livestock fled with the refugees to Senegal, much to the satisfaction of our Senegalese brothers. Others fled to the Kundara region. The Tugas have eaten our cows in a crazy way, even exporting our cows. But we as leaders and directors haven't given that sufficient attention. We haven't worked together with our population to show them the importance of conserving our wealth in cattle. Fortunately, the local authorities and indigenous colonial soldiers hardly ever eat our small goats or chickens today. But what have we already done to properly sustain our animals, to take care of them appropriately, leading our people to care for and to treat them better? The comrades, political, security, and health commissars, and leaders never give a day's thought to our general wealth in cattle, with exceptions, of course. For example, there was a case in which one of our leaders wrote to me asking for milk because 2 calves were born and he had no milk to give them. This was in an area of our land where there are newborn calves everywhere. I wrote to him saying that he should look for cows to milk because I wouldn't send him any milk. And he got it. The comrades aren't disposed to thinking or to seeking resolutions to problems in that context as in other contexts, unfortunately. They only want what comes easy. But if we were to labor well, we could have milk at leisure in our land. We could even have cheese or make butter in the liberated areas, because this is in no way difficult. Anyone can teach another how to make butter somewhere. In the rainy season, for example, one can't cultivate onions. But now in November, in the dry season, any army unit can set up some small plots for cultivating onions or garlic in the corner of their bar racks. It's enough to designate 2 comrades to keep watch near the river in order to properly irrigate, as much in the Korubal as in the Kanjambari or any other river. We can cultivate near a water source in the south of our land, in Kubaseko or in Kwinara or in whichever strip of land. But no one does this because they hope that the party will send what is needed. They forget that we're losing our time, which is important to be able to facilitate the advance of our people, our struggle, and ourselves within the context of satisfying our needs. We should confess that in this sphere, our party hasn't had great victories, except for the fact that, in a few areas, the number of balanas increased, the production of rice rose a bit, and a few other things, like manioc, were further cultivated. There was a certain success of political work in getting certain populations to cultivate a lot, but now we don't have any success in this work, because our leaders haven't attached any importance to matters of our economic development, to the extent that we can. It's not for working miracles, but insofar as we can really work. We are an agricultural country. We should lead everyone to produce. The population, troops, and even students should produce. We gave orders, for example, for every school to have its field of production. Rarely is there a school that makes its field of production, but the leaders pass by, look, and don't say anything. The directors pass by, look, and don't say anything. And the result is that it's even necessary that we send the boarding schools rice to eat. We can ask, what are the children there to learn? What interest is there in seeking to learn how to read if they're not capable of cultivating a little piece of land? We can't let our people fall into that kind of vice. We want to learn how to read, to learn everything, but we have to learn to work in order to sustain ourselves, because no one in the world is going to give us food, and a people incapable of producing its food on its own can't have anything else in life. Of course, during wartime and the time of our struggle, we have to avoid every species of luxury, finery, and theatricality. And we have to be capable of properly saving and distributing with justice the little that we have for our people's depositories, so that the greatest possible number of people can benefit from the advantages that our party created. And right now, we have to prepare our plans for our land's economy in independence. It's not only tomorrow that we should do it, but right now, all of us. The party has to properly know the concrete possibilities of our land in every sector of the economy and to prepare plans, consciously and even based on science, for the development of our land. If we were not capable of this, of concretely establishing our path to be able to advance in our land, of concretely establishing an economic politics for our land, then we are dying, growing tired, being wounded, and ruining our life for nothing, because we aren't capable, as I promised you, of extracting the necessary yield to make our people progress, and after the many sacrifices of this war. Today, like tomorrow, we should orient our work in the sphere of economic resistance along these lines. Increase our land's production and improve that production more each day. We must be capable of extracting from every piece of land the maximum that it can give. We should economize, which means to increase our gains and to reduce our expenditures. It's something that costs a lot for the comrades to get, even today when our party has practically no revenue, unless they sell some cola nuts or some lizard or crocodile skins. Our party has practically no revenue. Our comrades don't have the least caution or pay the least attention to the fact that they shouldn't spend much. Everything that's given to the comrades to spend passes through their hands as though it were the water of the Korubal or Giba rivers. We're going to spend, of course, and this won't stop, especially on things of great import to us, such as ammunition. Many arms are ruined through carelessness, and much ammunition has been lost from carelessness and overspending. But that, we understand, is a new experience in the context of our land's new war, and we can admit certain difficulties and certain deficiencies. But for other things, like gasoline, medicine, even rice, for those areas that provide rice. The following occurs, as you comrades well know. A group of combatants has to bring rice to eat, because in the area where they're located, such as the border zone, there are no possibilities of getting rice from the population. So while we have rice now and provide rice for 2 months, suddenly all that rice has already been eaten in 20 days. How is this possible since we have no revenue? We must stop with this, comrades. Another important aspect, obviously related to our economic context, is the issue of transportation. Today, it's difficult to discuss this problem because we're in the middle of war and we destroy the enemy's economy, destroying roads, And it would have been good were we to have destroyed even the enemy's possibilities of moving about on the roads and in rivers of our land. But we still don't destroy everything. On one hand, this is good for us. On the other hand, this is bad for us, because if we want to develop our economy in certain areas, we can't do this since we have no roads. We don't have time to tar roads, etc. But right now, we should think about this impending problem for our land. And we have to seriously think about the advantages of defending the means of fluvial transportation. This means transportation via rivers, because our land in Guinea is rich with canals and waterways for the disposal of our products and for creating new such possibilities tomorrow. At the same time, we want to create possibilities that guarantee a link between our Bayagos Islands and the islands of Cape Verde. Because a land can only really advance if its networks are like the circulation of blood within a human body. The system of transportation and communications is as important for a country to advance as are blood vessels, arteries, etc. in a human body. We have to think about this from today onward, and we did think about it this year. That doesn't mean that even now we shouldn't do what is possible to guarantee the means of transportation. Our party has done the most it can to have cars and boats to bring provisions to our people. Perhaps we're the only case of a struggle for liberation in which boats provide for some areas of the land. Our party has been capable of guaranteeing this, despite all of the difficulties, despite all of the carelessness our comrades have with our material. But in our land, particularly in Guinea, where we are already at war, we should also be capable of guaranteeing the means of transportation. Can we not do this with roads? We have many rivers, and we guarantee and build canoes. The Tuga is well aware of this, and it's his great task to break our canoes. But we should be firmly resilient. First of all, we aren't going to let the Tugas break our canoes. We're going to hide them, the ones that we use, whether for transporting our material or for transporting the goods of our personnel. We're going to properly use them and hide them. Unfortunately, when many of our comrades travel by river in canoes, they leave them right where the Tuga himself can grab them and break them. There are 1,000 ways to hide canoes. But if by bad luck the Tugas break our canoes, we should get people to construct canoes, choosing people familiar with woodworking to do so. In Boé, for example, we never lack canoes. Why? Because we gave Idrissa one task, to make canoes. But during this struggle, in certain areas where the Tugas break canoes, it has happened that rather than arranging for other canoes, some comrades, not all, fortunately, send us telegrams. Cabral, the Tugas broke the canoe. What can I do if he is the leader, he is there, and he manages the population and combatants? Why doesn't he arrange for people to make canoes? Many comrades think that we have to arrange for boats, and we in fact do this. But boats can't solve this problem because we are not going to buy boats to station all over. We made an effort to arrange for outboard motors in some areas, and we still have outboard motors today. But the truth is that in some areas, like Quidafine for example, the comrades blew out the motors completely in a few days. I myself left and went to Ghana to buy new motors, but they all blew out in less than a month because the comrades want to play with them, rather than use them only at the necessary moment. And the comrades don't give any importance to a simple rule, which is the following. To use a motor, it's necessary to mix gasoline with oil. But no, if there's no oil, they use gasoline and head off because they want to go for a ride. That, comrades, is our life's misfortune from an economic point of view. Afterward, they say that there are no provisions because there's no way to transport things. This can't be. Another means of transportation that we could utilize a lot in this war is the bicycle, using it like the Vietnamese. While our land may have certain conditions, perhaps more difficult, our land, nevertheless, greatly resembles Vietnam. We started experimenting. We directed comrades to transport things via bicycle, but all of the bicycles completely broke in a few days. Still others stopped in the middle of the path, put the bicycle on their head, and carried it like this. Why? Because they were not used to it, they said. It's really difficult to pull a bicycle, but other peoples have proven by experience that a bicycle that is fixed up works well and has sticks to hold the load can carry 250 kilos. A man can hardly carry 20 kilos. We could furnish areas of our land, many areas, with bicycles alone. Of course, it's difficult. Sometimes it's necessary to traverse rivers, flooded places, etc. But we can ride bicycles. If we give a bicycle to a comrade to go, for example, from the border to Kubukare, he can go by bicycle. But if he goes with a load, it's difficult, and that is the problem. The bicycle could be a magnificent means in our land, but it was necessary that our vanguard comrades, the most enlightened, provide an example of this, remain firm, and show what is possible so that we can imitate the Vietnamese people, who are able to carry loads great distances by bicycle alone until they beat the enemy. I remember, for example, a great act accomplished by our comrades in the south of our land. We wanted to carry heavy arms to Kubukare and Tombali. There was a lot of difficulty lugging arms heavier than 15 kilos. The comrades constructed a raft on the Balana River and came to the border looking for arms to bring. That shows that when we're willing, when we in fact decide to do something, we're capable. We are thus able to do great things. The Farim River has been blocked countless times. But the comrades are capable of breaking and passing through because it's necessary to do so, because a comrade leader appeared and said, "Let's go, forward, hold tight." But unfortunately, not all comrades are of this sort. Such comrades are necessary for the responsibility and the needs that we have on the path of moving our struggle forward. This problem of transportation is an issue to which we have to call the attention of the comrades many times. No one can think that the party management is going to send trucks to the land's interior. There are parts of our land in which we've already entered by truck, but this was a very special circumstance. It must be the party leaders who are able to resolve the transportation problem. It's incredible, for instance, how Sector 2 of the Eastern Front can sometimes be without ammunition. But no other sector makes an effort to bring them ammunition, for example. There is ammunition, great quantities in certain areas, and there are only difficulties with ammunition because the comrades don't get up to go help the others to resolve this problem. Even with the issue of rice, in some areas rice abounds, in others there is little. But bringing rice over there is difficult because they don't put their heads together to find a solution to resolve this. Sometimes they do this, yes, and it's proof of what we're always capable of doing, if only we want to. It's a matter of willpower, dedication, interest, and thought to be transformed into action on the path of better serving our party. In order to advance with our struggle in the context of economic resistance, we should avoid excessively overburdening our people so they don't think that our party also wants to exploit them. We always give our comrades watchwords not to abuse the goods, chickens, or cows of our people. If one were to give something, we accept it, but we shouldn't demand anything or take anything by force. Not even this has been well respected at all times. We should always be aware that those who try to exploit our people are criminal, favorable to the Tugas, enemies of our people, and enemies of our party. In these cases, it's necessary to know with clarity who committed acts against our people in order that they be convicted or even, if necessary, shot, whether this be a party head or a leader. Our comrades have made a concerted effort to avoid abuses against our people. The party directors and leaders have made a concerted effort to avoid this, but we have to be completely finished with all the abuses of our land. We have to remove the excessive burden on our people, and we have to show them that we will never, not once, do them harm. Furthermore, we have to encourage, finding ways of compensating, with praise, rewards, and decorations, the people of our land who produce more. We want the following in our land tomorrow, that the names of only those persons who produce more be praised. Whoever produces more rice in our land, whether a person, a family, or a cooperative, those are our land's best people, whose names should be elevated with rewards. This goes for whoever produces more peanuts, more palm oil, etc., comrades. And we should firmly chastise those who don't work to produce what is necessary in our land in the context of our economic resistance. Of course, we have other, very important problems for our future, such as developing and stabilizing our land's market, developing the greatest exchange with other countries, and establishing, therefore, an entire system of foreign commerce. We have to thoroughly study the problem of prices in our land. Sometimes we're in this struggle, and we think that it's only about killing Tugas, fighting, and reclaiming the land. The biggest problems are still in front of us, comrades. We have to know who will direct our land regarding the issue of commerce. In our land, commerce is still in the hands of the Tugas, and even importation and exportation are in their hands. That has to be clearly established in our land tomorrow. Our party has to be capable of defining that clearly in order to avoid confusions. From the outset, we must break with every future tendency to exploit our people. And right now, we have to avoid all wrong ideas in the context of our economic resistance. One great error that we have committed in our land until today is the following: that no one pays taxes until they were liberated. This is an error. We should be able, after liberating an area like Kubukare, for example, to immediately establish what sort of tax the people should pay. Though not even being in money, the taxes could be in nature, as they say, which means in products or produce, so that our people don't lose the habit of paying taxes, so that they don't think that when we reclaim our land, then there won't be taxes. No land whatsoever can advance without paying taxes. That was an error, but it was a necessary error given our mentality, which was still not seriously nationalist. We still didn't have serious national consciousness. And in our land's context, if, at the same time that we liberate Kubukare, we collect taxes, perhaps the population would still side with the Tugas. This is why we committed that error. But we have to enlighten the people, telling them clearly, as we have always, as a matter of fact, done, that they don't pay taxes now, but tomorrow they will have to pay them. A large part of our people know this. They have already comprehended it well. We should just explain to them that the tax they are going to pay tomorrow is not like that of the Tugas, neither in its basis, which means regarding the criterion or norm established for the payment of taxes, nor in its purpose, which means for what the tax serves. Taxes in our land have to serve to constantly elevate our people's standard of living in the economic, social, and cultural spheres. We should always proceed with plans if we in fact want to win our economic resistance, which is against the Tugas today and against underdevelopment and backwardness tomorrow. We should be realistically familiar with the conditions of our land in Guinea and Cape Verde in order to make concrete plans in advancing the development of our land. And we shouldn't proceed like one who enters a dark room, stumbling over everything, knocking over furniture, hitting one's head against the wall, without knowing what one is doing. That's very important for our victory tomorrow in the sphere of our economic resistance, comrades. Right now, we should avoid, like tomorrow, the delusion of grandiose plans. We should do what is possible in every phase of our life, and we should know how to do it well. We should combat all those who remain with crossed arms. Today, just as tomorrow, everyone who is able must work in our land. Whoever doesn't work doesn't have rights to anything in our land. It has to be like this. Those who have value work. Those who are without value are so because they don't work. And the best are those who work most. It has to be thus in our land, and it should be thus in our struggle. In the actual daily life of our party, we should move those comrades who work the most to the front, and everyone should be certain of the following. Whoever worked a lot yesterday has value and moves to the front. Whoever stops working because they already worked a lot yesterday isn't worth anything, was never worth anything. I always repeat, in our party's work, everyone is like the stem of a banana tree. Every year one must provide new bananas. Don't think that because a new stem was provided last year that we're all set. No, they are all able to provide more stems. Every stem of the banana tree that yields fruit has to be cut, because it's necessary for it to provide another stem, another plant for yielding more fruit. It's like this in the life of our party. No one think that it's possible to sleep in the shade of another who worked yesterday. There are various comrades within our party who, because they worked a lot in the mobilization, because they worked a lot in the first guerrilla phase, because they worked a lot with provisions at a certain time, because they were good guerrilla or army directors, etc., draw back and shy away from arranging military maneuvers so that they don't have to work much. They pass through life at a standstill, hidden in a base, or often even outside the land's borders. It can't be like this, comrades. No one gains anything in our party if we stop constantly working, offering more sacrifice and showing more willpower and decisiveness in our labor. Another grave thing in our party and in our struggle is the following. A few comrades who were wounded were still quite competent. The majority were still quite competent, thank God. We say thank God, but it's also thanks to our party. Of 500 wounded comrades, for example, more than 450 or 480 are competent and so can return to fight. But there is a tendency today, comrades, which is the following. I'm wounded, and now I'm going to make a big deal of my injury in order to stop fighting. I just arrived in Ziguinchor. I had good luck in arriving in Conakry. I didn't die. I was wounded a bit. Now I'm done fighting. No, comrades. That is demobilization and desertion. In any country where the people are aware, in any struggle in which the combatants are aware, taking a beating, it leads to more courage, fighting with still more willpower, because they not only defend their cause to which they firmly dedicate themselves, but they also have to make the enemy pay for the wrongs they've done. In other countries, there are combat ants with legs cut off who request special legs in order to return to the fight again. In other countries, there are political commissars, for example, who in the middle of war are injured in the arm, and the doctor says that they have to rest 6 months for the arm to heal. They ask for their arm to be cut off, since this will allow them to be healed in 15 days and be able to continue fighting. This is because a political commissar only needs his head. He can work even without his arms. In our land, there are political commissars who, if they have the good luck of injuring a finger, find a pretext for stopping, for not continuing any longer. Fortunately, comrades, the majority of our people aren't like this. Fortunately, there are many comrades who have bullets in their bodies, who are sticking it out in our work, and who we sometimes have to convince to leave the fight. There are comrades who have already been wounded 3-4 times who are sticking it out in the struggle, every day with more enthusiasm, with more courage. Those are the owners of our party, comrades. Those are the true children of our people. Those are truly the owners of our land's future. Those are the new directors, and I tell them in particular, comrades, you're my strength. A few of you are seated here. You're all of our strength, and you're the ones who justify all the sacrifices we make in order to move forward. There are comrades who were already wounded. For example, one who is not here, Comrade Chemo, without having been cured yet. And when there was an attack, he returned to go attack. Isn't this right, comrades? We sent him to Europe to be treated, and his only desire was to return quickly. And in fact, on the day in which I went to that land to go see him, by chance, he was in the airport to come back directly to the forest without asking for anything or discussing anything. Because there are others that, when they're wounded or sick, find an immediate occasion to demand things from the party. They ask, for example, that the party pay them. Those comrades who in fact demand nothing, providing sacrifices, their strength, their energy. Those comrades aren't only waging an armed or political struggle, but also greatly assist our economic resistance in the face of the enemy who we want to destroy economically. We want to really avoid all needless waste, that is, wasting things that we can save. We should avoid that, particularly with food, even, for example, in the school, in the home. In other places, a lot of food or rice remains, and other people come looking for the remainder in order to raise pigs. This is because we don't make the effort to sufficiently measure the rice that arrives for the comrades in order to save it for our party. The comrades in Conakry or in Ziguinchor that use cars make excessive trips when it's possible to resolve their problems with only a few trips. In addition, there are those who have to make trips and can go at the same time with another person, but refuse and even hide themselves to go later. They don't know that that only wears on our cars, wastes gasoline, and creates problems for the party. In our economic resistance, we have to combat every form of troublemaking, theft, corruption, and corrupt persons who take advantage of opportunities to rob so much money that the party puts in their hands for administrating a home, a boarding school, or any other thing. For example, they gather cows and take them to be sent abroad for sale. That's a form of theft as well. We should combat this with force, comrades. We should elevate the respect and consideration for those comrades who to this day and in this party have not been capable of doing anything of the sort. On the contrary, they have maintained their clean behavior and sought to help others to remain clean as well. We Africans are famous for our underdevelopment, of which there is no one to whom ultimate responsibility is given over means, money, and other things, who doesn't in turn rob. And the things that have in fact happened in independent African countries arouse great fear in us. But things that have also happened even with some of our very own comrades, that frightens us greatly, comrades. We should remind the comrades, leaders, and combatants that it's also stealing when, for example, we rightly take things from the enemy in war, but don't talk to the people in the villages about the things taken. Rightly taking things from the enemy in war, but hiding them, keeping them. That's not just. That's robbery, and to begin doing the work of thieves. Our combatants are honest people, serious, decent, dignified, and our people's best children. So, when in war our combatant grabs a watch, a bracelet, a golden necklace, or any other thing taken from the enemy, he should show it to the boss, let him deal with it, and not keep it. This is because if he does otherwise, he isn't yet a combatant for the liberation of his land, but a highway robber. A few comrades didn't understand this. They didn't understand. When they bring something dangling on their chest that was taken from some village, or from some encounter with the enemy, the extent of their disrepute in the face of those in the party who are serious. Many comrades didn't understand this, but it was a matter of disgrace for them. Even watches. Of course, if an individual grabs a watch in a war, it's for him. But he first has to show the boss, who will later tell him he can keep it. And if he already has a watch and wants to keep the other, he should pass the first to a comrade who doesn't have one. But no, there are comrades who take things and keep quiet, and thus they show that their consciousness hasn't understood the value of their work, the very sacrifice they are making. He places his value below the value of some watch, though tomorrow he could have as many as he honestly wanted. We have to combat all of this, comrades, and in our economic sphere, as in other spheres, we have to combat tendencies toward extremisms. For example, when comrades say, "We're going to give our people forced labor." No, comrades, we're not going to compel the people by force to cultivate this or that thing. No, that might work, but we don't want it. We don't want extremism. That's a misunderstanding of our struggles present and future. And even in the framing of our future, in the planning of our life tomorrow, we have to avoid all extremism, all exaggeration. Above all, the mania of too many progressives. For example, there can be comrades right now who put the problem in the following way. In our land, agriculture is something backward. Everyone wants to leave agriculture behind. England developed, though few people work in agriculture. France advanced to the extent that it reduced its farmers and increased its industries. We see that countries advance by heavy industry. Therefore, after independence, we in Guinea and Cape Verde should work only in industry and cease with agriculture. But we should also be vigilant in avoiding those errors contrary to these. There are those who think we should leave our land as it is now because it's good like this. We're Africans. We should have our own moderators, people who work the land, people who work in commerce, etc. Because it's thus that we're good Africans with our traditions and our customs. The Balantas grow rice, the Fulas grow peanuts, the Falupis grow rice, the Manjacos grow peanuts, rice, and other things. The Bijagos collect coconuts, The Cape Verdeans produce corn until they die of hunger when there's none left. No, none of this. This is the opposite extremism. In today's terms, what I said first can be called the left's deviance, and what I said now is the right's deviance. This doesn't mean that the middle is better. There are many people who deem that the middle is good, but this isn't true. What is good is knowing how to join things from one side and the other in order to move forward. Joining things from one side and the other and seeking the just path in a land doesn't mean staying in the middle. One can't do anything in the middle. But that's a more complicated discussion to which we will return on another occasion. Thus, we have to be in the sphere of our economic resistance as in other spheres, moving beyond our weaknesses and continually elevating all of our forces. We must combat our weaknesses to elevate our forces. This is our discussion for today about our resistance in the economic sphere. Chapter 5. Cultural Resistance. We have to remember that it's not enough to produce, to have a full stomach, to practice sound politics, and to make war. If a man, a woman, a human being does all of this without advancing as an intelligent being, as the foremost being in nature, without truly feeling every day that knowledge of the environment and of the world in general increases in one's head, without, that is, advancing in the cultural sphere, then all that one does, producing, practicing sound politics, fighting, hasn't worked at all. In our specific situation, we have to give great attention to our cultural resistance. From the beginning, our party has given great attention to this, and in this sense, it took the necessary measures, from the Casaca Congress onward, while even before this we had advised that in order to advance in our struggle, we should make cultural resistance. Actually, we should state concretely that the creation of our own party, which planned and advanced our struggle of national liberation, is a fact of culture. It's a clear test of our cultural resistance because we want to be ourselves, Africans from Guinea and Cape Verde, and not Tugas. Our culture isn't the culture of the Tugas, although today our culture might have some influence from the culture of the Tugas. Thus, all of our combatants, leaders, and cognizant militants should know clearly that our struggle is also cultural resistance, if not the primary mode of our cultural resistance, armed struggle. We should work a lot to extinguish the colonial culture in our heads, comrades. And whether we like it or not, in the city or in the forest, colonialism inserted a lot of things into our heads, and our task should be to remove what isn't useful and to leave what is good. This is because colonialism doesn't only have things that are useless. Therefore, we should be capable of combating colonial culture and leaving in our heads that aspect of human scientific culture that the Tugas brought by chance to our land and also placed in our heads. To give a concrete example, I am African, and it could happen, as it still does with other Africans, that I convince myself that in order for certain things to occur in my life, that it be necessary to satisfy the will of a spirit. And the spirit said that what I asked for in our conversation could only be realized if I take a little girl who just turned 3 years old as alms to kill, to make a sacrifice, and then all that I want could be realized. That still exists in Africa, and if we look closely, people who believe in such things might still exist in our land. I remember a comrade named Alfucine, who we sent for the struggle in Gabu. You remember, Lucio. One day he found me to tell me that the spirit in Gabu didn't want us to fight there unless his son was sacrificed. I interpreted this in the following manner. He was native to Gabu and looking for a way to be in charge because he wanted to be the chief in Gabu. And so he wanted to show that the spirit was interested in his son, thus that he should be the boss. I told him, "Comrade, if that's how we're going to struggle in Gabu, let's go look for that spirit until we find it and kill it, because it's a spirit from the Tugas. It was the Tuga who put it there. It's not from our land. But it could be that I, as an African, still have this in my head. At this very moment while I'm speaking like this, in some lands of Africa, there are children who are dead in order to satisfy the will of a spirit. I never had such things in my head. I grew up in Africa, but I learned the following. The most wonderful and delicate things in the world are children. We should give to children the best that we have. We should educate them so that they're raised with an open spirit, so that they understand things, so that they're good, and so that they avoid every type of evil. So we should never do them any harm at all, much less kill them. Thus, I have the obligation to defend my land against all those people who have that aspect of culture stuck in their heads. But as an African, I also had much contact with the Tugas. And it's possible that I had gotten it into my head that I'm the son of civilized folks, that I'm civilized. I went to school, I never lived in the forest, which is filthy, and that I had a reasonable home, even though my mother was poor. I could have thought that I had nothing to do with the people in the forest, that those of the forest were distant brothers, and that I was superior to them. This is the colonial mentality. It's to copy the mentality of the Tugas, the colonialists. We have to combat this, whether it's in my head or in anyone else's head. I gave you concrete examples, therefore, of what we should preserve from our contact with other realities, and what we should eliminate from the contact with our own reality. So the comrades have already understood what our cultural resistance is. Our cultural resistance consists of the following. While we liquidate the colonial culture and the negative aspects of our own culture in our spirit, in our midst, we have to create a new culture, also based on our traditions, but respecting everything that the world has won today for serving people. There are many people today who think that in order for Africa to resist culturally, it's always necessary to do the same things that have already been done for 500 or 1,000 years. Yes, Africa in fact has its own culture, and that is our precise opinion. Some aspects of that culture are eternal. They never end. They can transform along the way, but will never run dry. For example, our types of dance, our own rhythm of Africa. But no one thinks that the drum is only from Africa. No one thinks that certain styles of clothing, straw skirts, palm leaves, etc., are only from Africa. No one thinks that eating by hand only happens in Africa. All of the world's peoples go through this, and there are still peoples in the world, in Brazil, for example, who are worse off than us in this, as in Indonesia, Polynesia, and East Asia. Many people think that in order to defend African culture, in order to resist culturally in Africa, we have to defend the negative things of our culture. No, in our opinion, that's not the case. Rather, culture is also a product of a people's economic level. Our opinion is that eating by hand, manners of dancing, and even singing certain types of tunes depend on the life led by a people from the point of view of producing, i.e., producing riches, producing things for them. That's why the Balanta's tunes are different from the Mandinga's tunes, for example. Analyzed thoroughly, the Balanta's tunes are those of people from the plains. When we compare the Balanta's tunes with those of Europe, we see that they're similar to Alentejano tunes, slow in chorus. This is because there are certain types of economic existence and geographical environments that give rise to certain types of songs. The people who live in the mountains have certain types of songs. Those who always live with cattle have their type of dance. Those who live alone in the forest, without cattle, have yet another type of dance. Those who live in the desert, where there are giraffes and other things, have another type of dance. This is the case whether in Africa, in Asia, or in America. And our type of relations with nature is like our economy, our economic development. Whoever believes that a cow is a god raises it up when he or she dances. The dance itself presents the cow as God. But whoever believes that God is hidden in the forest has a dance that respects the forest. And the songs evoke a special kind of music with special words in regard to this. This is illustrated in every part of the world where there is such a concrete economic situation and a given situation of relations with nature. Those who are still afraid of lightning, floods, and thunder have songs and dances that are of a certain type. There might be one or another difference, but they're similar. Of course, if we compare our dances with the dances of Europe, of the cities, etc., we see that they're dissimilar, that they're ultra-modern dances. But if we compare our dances with folklore, that is, with the arts and customs of Eastern European peoples, or even more, with those of Asia, we find a few dances that are very similar to ours, comrades. So our point of view is that we should make resistance in our culture in order to conserve what is in fact useful and constructive, but in the certainty that, to the extent that we move forward, our clothing, our manner of eating, our manner of dancing and singing, and everything else has to change bit by bit. This is even more the case in regard to our minds, our sense of relations with nature, and even our relations with each other. For example, we Africans are in a situation such that we need security because we still have not tamed nature. So we need what is called organizational security. Organizational security is better the greater the number of people who are near us. If I were alone in the woods, I would be afraid, so being there with various people would be better. But that organizational security has a contradiction, which is that some don't even trust those who are around them. There is such a great need for security that we always need someone together with us. But as security isn't guaranteed and is so great, one begins to distrust those who are with us. Now, this happens in our midst, even with a person in whom we trust. Yesterday we trusted her, but today when she comes to give us a hand, we distrust that hand. One gives them a hand, but always without trust. There are still those who go right away to wash their hands for fear of something bad. Some even distrust others' eyes. And there are people among us who always take advantage of this in order to stare into our eyes. Take Luciano, for example. Strong, valiant, truculent, sometimes a leader of our home during the time that we prepared the comrades. There was a poor man lying down in Conakry who, like the Moors at the time, had the crazy idea of going off with the opportunists. The truth is that he was bad news, and Luciano was afraid of him. He only wanted to hit him. One day this man came to the edges of our home, and Luciano went toward him, messing with him, etc. This man took out his set of animal horns, pointed them at Luciano and yelled, "Ah!" And Luciano returned later, now afraid of animal horns. Comrades, we laugh about this now, but many of the comrades who are seated here are still afraid of animal horns. Today, we laugh and are afraid. Don't think that when the children from São Vicente arrive with their delusions, or when those of Praia or the Cape Verdean woods arrive, that they aren't afraid too. Afraid of Moors, for instance. Once when I got sick, my mother took me to a Moor because she thought that perhaps someone had done evil to me. Fear of card reading, fear of hair. They make amulets of hair to cast off evil. But we're certain that in our land tomorrow, the children of our people in Guinea and Cape Verde, in the woods, will no longer be afraid of animal horns. First and foremost, horns are something rich in calcium that grow on the heads of certain animals, comrades. If we burn them, they have a special aroma as a result of proteins and other chemical products that they have. Animal horns don't do anything. But as much as I yell today, no one hears me, I don't believe you all. That's why I'm not going to go to the trouble of fighting you on this. I only tell you to hold tight in the struggle and to work a lot. Because the children of your children won't believe in that if we in fact complete our duties in relation to our people, as we should. Even the Swedes, those two you saw, the fathers of their fathers, also believed in animal horns. And, in their land, the ancient Swedish form of burial was the same as the manner of burying people in our land today. The manner of burying kings in the times of ancient Sweden was the same as the burying of our kings too. They went into the grave with all of their things, and at times their wives, killed to place in the same grave. The Vikings, who were the ancestors of the Swedes, didn't go into battle without an amulet. One day when we were in Cuba, Osvaldo and I were sitting down to watch a film about Vikings on television. I enjoy seeing films about Vikings, and Osvaldo was up for it. Suddenly warriors appeared, and Osvaldo said, "Hey, comrade, they have their own period for wearing amulets." Well, of course, no one thinks that we Africans know a lot, or that we can only wage war because we have amulets. The Vikings liked to use amulets. The Franks, comrades, the people of ancient France, fought against Caesar of Rome everywhere only with amulets. Likewise with the ancient English and the American Indians. In China, Mao Zedong had the great task of ending issues with amulets, yet even today, sorcery in China hasn't ended. There are ethnic groups in China that have sorcery. If you read the works of the Vietnamese, you'll see that sorcery exists in Vietnam as well. One of the great Vietnamese leaders said that they had to accept their people's amulets in order to lead the struggle. With those who scratch their heads, we also have to think before we do anything with them. We participated in ceremonies with them, but with the certainty that it was wrong. We only need to engage such things rationally to avoid misfortunes. No one thinks that we're better than others because these things exist among us, because we're Africans, or because we know of amulets that others don't know about. They knew of these things, but have since forgotten. Like our garb for dancing. Everyone in the world used garb for dancing, and there are those who still use it all over. Bubu and Ghanaian-style garb are similar to garb in Rome. You see films about the Romans, and their clothes are called togas, but togas are clothes like any other. Sandals and garb, nothing more. But today there are people who walk in garb as if in fact only Africa had garb, as if it were only Africa that knew about such clothes. It's a reflection of the state of economic development, nothing else. It's good and it's ours, but we're not now going to think that it's only ours. A day will come when the children of our children's children will have to forget all that. Unfortunately, we may not live long enough to be able to see it. Like today, when we see things about the Vikings, we think that they were crazy. We don't understand that the Vikings lived their own life and in a different time. They never took a step without consulting a sorcerer first. The king always went around with the sorcerer at his side. In ancient times, before going into combat, the Romans would open the stomach of a chicken to see if the time was right to make war or not. There were even people called augurs, who the chiefs consulted in order to know if they could go to war or not. In ancient Greece, which was the center of world civilization, there were sorcerers who lived in the mountains called pythonesses, who were consulted to know the destiny of war, of persons, etc. And the people brought them offerings because God was within them. It's like our spirit of Kobiana, comrades. But that was 3,000 years ago in Greece. Even more so in Egypt. In ancient Egypt, all of the pharaohs had their sorcerers, and God was an ox, Apis, who was untouchable because the cow was sacred, as in India even today. They don't eat cows in India. There are people who die of hunger in front of their cow because they can't kill it, because the cow is God. They bring the cow to the river to wash it, and everyone enters the water with the cow in order to bathe themselves in the water of God. We have to have a good grasp of this in order to forge our cultural resistance on that real basis of our cultural resistance. We should clean our land of every noxious influence of colonial culture, comrades. And the first act of culture that we should instigate in our land is the following: the unity of our people, the necessity of fighting and developing in every one of us a new idea, which is patriotism, the love for our land as a single entity. That is the first part of culture that we should give to our land. And we should demonstrate the value of resisting the enemy, the stranger in our land. We pulled together our forces in order to not allow our people, our land's children, to be stepped on, humiliated by other people. Understand clearly that we, in our land, have rights equal to those of any other people in their own land. That's a great advancement of our culture, if we manage to do it, and we will do it before long. Our own war will accomplish this in our land. Moreover, comrades, we have to elevate in the spirit of each, above all, in the spirit of every combatant, the value of heroism, in order to be capable of having courage to rigorously fulfill the words of the party. If it's necessary to kill the enemy in a given location, to go kill him oneself. That is culture, comrades. When a man is capable of doing that, he is in fact cultured. And to the extent that a group of men, such as those here who find themselves before a given reality, are capable of uniting together as if they were a single man, those men are very cultured. Consider this, for example. Our Mandinga population, for example, has many feuds between themselves and talk a lot. Some are crazy enough to think of themselves as better than others, pushing and pulling, robbing, until some say that when Mandinga say one thing, they are thinking exactly the opposite. That's why it seems to be a divided population. But in a cultural act, such as praying, they seem to be a single person. In other ethnic groups, for example, coming before a spirit is pointless. For example, if we say the following to a Balanta or a Manjaco, "Listen, Bobo is a good guy," he'll later say that he's a friend of Bobo and repeat the same thing to others. Some believe him and others don't. But if we say that a spirit of Kobiana says such a thing, even if they were in the Soviet Union or any other place, everyone believes. Mandingas, Mancanhas, Pepes, Balantas, everyone. You see, therefore, how, facing a cultural situation, a people is capable of joining together, even being a people as divided as our people were. This is why, when we say that we're capable of joining together to resist our enemy, we're increasing our culture. This is also a proof that we, in fact, have culture. And we have to be capable, as the party, as a political organization, to continually raise in the spirit of our people in Guinea and Cape Verde this concrete idea. The only child of our land is the one who is patriotic. And moreover, in this phase of our struggle, he who has a love for our party. That is culture in our land today. It's not fundamental in our culture today to teach reading and writing or to make it to second grade. That's also necessary. We already spoke of it. What is fundamental is to really learn what our party wants, what we want and what we're searching for, what we're doing, what our struggle is, and where we're going. This is what's important, comrades, to be capable of giving one's life. Whoever is capable of giving their life for the party without asking for anything, that person is now cultured in our land. And in the face of this struggle, we can compare, for example, diverse races of Guinea in order to see which is more cultured or less cultured. Sometimes those who know more about certain things appear to be less cultured, and whichever Mané or Nabana, there in the middle of the forest, who hangs in there with their work, is more cultured than an Alvarenga or any other well-educated person who continues to follow the Tugas. This is because the former corresponds to that relation of man in society and of man in relation to nature that serves the interest of his people in order to gain a greater standard of living tomorrow. This is culture, comrades. To really understand the concrete situation of one's land, to transform it in the direction of progress. We should instill, place in the spirit of everyone, the certainty of our victory. That's a cultural act as well, comrades. For everyone to hold on, to not give up at all, to not despair in the face of any defeat, because there are no struggles that don't have defeats. In our struggle, there are also defeats, but that's a part of struggle. That's why it's a struggle. But we should continually elevate the trust in our victory. We should do everything to dishearten the enemy, to dishearten the enemy's agents, to show them that there is no way. They will certainly lose. That is culture, comrades. And, on the basis of the love for our land and for our people, on the basis of the love for our party, we should develop our dances, our tunes, our types of music, do theater, and even acrobatics, impressions of other people, etc. For example, when we imitate the colonists, Mr. So-and-so, etc., that's important. We should develop all of that in the service of our struggle, in the service of our cause today, with a content, that is to say, with new facts and words. This is the great value, for example, of the tunes of the Balantas, Biafadas, Mandingas, Creoles, Mancanas, Peples, and others, or of the Mornas and Coladeras that they already made on the basis of our struggle, raising up our party in the name of our courageous combatants, singing of our weapons, battles, attacks against Tuga plains, etc., showing the long path of our people in this war. That is our culture. That is what we should develop today. In line with this, we should of course advance in order to open the minds of our people in relation to literature, science, etc. This is because we know that it's not the illiterate who can make a good land. It's necessary to have people who can read and write. All of those people who know how to read and write should teach those who don't know. Much time has passed since our party issued this watchword, and much time has passed since our party began to create schools, to improve preparation for professors, to form frameworks so that we can advance along the path of the scientific knowledge of life and of the world. Whether our new culture is in or outside of school, we have to place it in the service of our resistance, in the service of compliance with our party program. It has to be that way, comrades. Our culture should be developed at the national level of our land, but without disparaging or considering as lesser the culture of others, and with intelligence, availing ourselves of the culture of others. Everything insofar as it's good for us. Everything insofar as it can be adapted to our living conditions. Our culture should be developed on the basis of science. It should be scientific, which is to say, not involve believing in imaginary things. Tomorrow our culture should avoid instances where any one of us thinks that lightning is a sign that God has become enraged, or that a thunderstorm is the sky's voice when a furious spirit speaks. In our culture tomorrow, everyone should know that while we dance when there are thunderstorms, a thunderstorm occurs when two clouds clash, one with a positive electrical charge and another with a negative electrical charge. And when they clash, they cause a flash, which is lightning, and a noise, which is the thunder. As when one grips two electrical wires, positive and negative, and touches one to the other, there is a flash. That's what lightning in the sky is, electricity in the clouds. The noise that is called thunder is the meeting of two clouds. This is so much the case that, given the speed of sound in air, when one hears a thunderstorm, one can calculate where one cloud meets another, because light moves faster than sound. Watch for lightning, and after a bit, you hear the noise. If it were, for example, 5 seconds, we can calculate where the two clouds meet and how far from us, because the speed of sound in the air is 340 meters per second. So, if in the moment that one sees lightning, one begins to count by seconds, for example, by multiplying 5 by 340, one gets 1,700 meters. That is to say, it was at a distance of 1,700 meters from where we are that the two clouds met and caused a thunderstorm and lightning. The thunderbolt is nothing more than an electric spark, which due to special conditions comes down to earth and which can come with enough force to destroy a bit, just as, by the way, we can make anything explode indoors with an electric current. Or then you see it strike with less force, entering someplace, happening, and then disappearing. This can even happen to a human body, which disappears into the ground because the earth is also electrically charged, just as opposite electric charges can produce sparks. This is why they put lightning rods on top of houses, in order for the lightning bolt to enter there and pass directly into the ground without doing anyone harm. Comrades, we have to base our culture on science. We have to rid our culture of everything, insofar as it is anti-scientific, if not yet today, then tomorrow. But if we work well today, we have the certainty that tomorrow that will be possible. Our culture has to be popular, which is to say, culture of the masses. Everyone has a right to culture. Moreover, we respect those cultural values of our people that deserve to be respected. Our culture cannot be for an elite, for a group of persons who knows a lot, who knows things. No. All of the children of our land, in Guinea and Cape Verde, must have the right to advance culturally, to participate in our cultural acts, to demonstrate, and to create culture. We should place the comparative situation of the city and the countryside deeply within our spirit. We should note that, While day by day foreign customs develop in our cities, some good, others bad, our general tendency is to take advantage of the bad ones. Alcoholism, prostitution, banditry, scams, assaults, robberies of a certain type, etc. Life is more pure in our forest, although by that I don't want to say that there might not be people who steal. But there is a great difference between a thief in Bissau and a Balanta thief who steals anywhere else. In general, the Balanta thief steals after the colonialists came, so already with colonialist influence. But he steals in general without interest in keeping what he stole. That which interests him is the act of stealing. This is the very reason why he often robs something, gives it to another, and never sees that thing again. Because in Balanta customs, pilfering is a sport to demonstrate one's ability, one's intelligence. If I have glasses, I guard them well, but another person thinks like this. I'll play around with him until I'm able to snatch them without his notice. That person demonstrates that he has a great capacity, more than my own, the capacity to trick me. That's the significance of Balanta robbery, to steal as an intellectual exercise, as an exercise of physical and intellectual capacity, without any interest in possessing what was stolen. This is the reason why, when a young Balanta reaches the moment to celebrate his passage to adulthood, he can count the number of robberies he performed in order to show his value and abilities. And the great men laud this, are happy, treating him as if he were their son, because he's a person of high caliber. Robberies in the cities, no. A thief from the city steals in order to allow his people to eat, or so that he might enrich himself. Aside from this, there are other types of thefts in business that are legal theft. We should know how to compare our forest with our city in order to avoid all the impurities of the city coming to the forest and to direct all the purities that can exist in our forest to our cities. I repeat that this doesn't mean that there aren't likely bad things in the forest. There are a lot of bad things, even issues of sacrifices, of beating children, etc. The manner in which they beat children in our land is hideous. We have to combat that as well. We can't set out from the principle that the forest is pure, that it has nothing bad about it, that the city alone is bad. No, there are bad things and good things as much in the city as in the forest. Only, comparatively, the city is less pure than the forest. And we have to make our countryside progress more each day, as much in the cultural sphere as in other spheres. From today on, comrades, we have to develop as an entire people, as combatants, as militants, and as a population in this consciousness. When a human being is laboring at something, he should do it well, perfectly, as quickly as possible, and in the simplest way possible. We should develop our spirit and the idea of perfection in the spirit of our people. We still don't have a very good sense of perfection. Look at that curtain. There isn't one comrade who would be capable of seeing that and lifting it to set it straight. It's not a problem for us if a nail that's put in the wall or clothes that are made remain crooked. We don't have a good idea of perfection. We have to combat that spirit and infuse in our people the spirit of perfection. If we're launching an ambush, we're going to do it in the best way possible. A comrade who went abroad for preparation or who already has sufficient knowledge knows how to launch an ambush. He should put such a weapon in such a location, another weapon in such a location. So many men there, so many over there, so many on reserve, etc., attacking the enemy at such a point. How many comrades do that? How many? When they do it well, the results are extraordinary, but the comrades in general don't remember that. This is as true of an ambush as going to regions where one must speak. In a meeting, a comrade has to speak, but without taking any appointments at all. He's just there in preparation. He can have recourse to a lot of conversation, but he has to study a bit, to remember things. Today there is a meeting with such a village, and it's necessary to sit down and to think about the problems with that village, taking the necessary notes. He's a political commissar. The party trusts him, and he is the party in that moment. He shouldn't converse just for the sake of conversing. It's necessary to study, which doesn't mean preparing a whole speech. It's not worth it to give a whole speech to our people in the forest. At times it is worth it, but it's necessary to take notes on all of the problems, to think about all of the problems that they are going to discuss. This is very important. We need to deal with meetings of leaders in which everyone wants to go to the meeting, but nobody knows what they're going to do there. Or at times, they hold a meeting in the following way. Various leaders meet in the north or in the south of our land in order to decide what? The watchwords of our party. There are comrades who send me meeting reports, and when they leave to see what the others decided, there are things already in the party's watchwords that they didn't read. But, on top of this, they made fewer and worse decisions than were already made. When a meeting of leaders is held, it's in order to deal with the following. To what extent have we already accomplished the party's watchwords? Take notes and discuss. Or if one or another problem emerges in the inter-regional committee, take notes beforehand to discuss it. Perfection in our work. This is very important, but perfection even in our manner of dressing. I tell the comrades over and over to fix their collars and to tuck in their shirt tails. A people that is fighting for its independence, for its dignity, from today on must proceed with clean feet. When one walks in the mud, patience. But when we get out of the mud, we're going to wash our feet. Clean clothes are only one way. Undress, tie on a piece of cloth, wash up, and you will become clean. Comb your hair. And if there isn't a comb, make a comb from a stick if necessary, if you're not able to buy one. But there are comrades who seem to have pride in their uncombed hair. It seems like an unimportant thing, but it's very important. For our dignity, in order to open new paths of life, the way in which we behave has great importance. Before, the Tugas said that we were quite filthy, but when we dressed well, they called us doctors. Black with a doctor's ways. That was the Tugas's position. But we don't have that complex. We're against everything dirty. We're against filthiness. For example, I marvel at how some comrades are as capable of lying down in a bed as on the ground. Fortunately, all aren't like this. But it doesn't matter if the bedroom is full of trash or clean. Even leaders amidst a mess, for example, are not capable of getting up to clean. They're capable of giving their life for their land, and they're not capable of cleaning the ground. They're not capable of sweeping, of straightening up the yard, of making any sort of small garden, when despite all of the work there is time for this. There are comrades of ours in the land who made their base beautiful, well put together, and even being against the bases. I never told them anything because I saw an effort, a will to arrange. But others don't want to know. When a man or a woman wants to give their life for a cause, they have to be clean, in a clean environment, to make all of those around them clean. Because only in this way can their spirit be cleaner each day. We have to have a notion of time in our culture, in our action. We weren't the ones who invented the watch, but we have to have a notion of time, comrades. We, in general, our comrades, don't have this, contrary to our people who know very well what time is, who know that if they don't cultivate until a determinate time, then things turn for the worse, that one has to sow so many days after the first rains. If not, then this is bad. They know that so many days after a plant grows on the edge of the house or rice in the nursery, these have to be taken to the balanya. If not, things don't work out. They know that so much time after opening a balanya, after clearing the mangroves, they can begin to plant, and not before this, because it still has salt, etc. Many of our comrades today don't have the slightest notion of time. If it's necessary to get up at 5 in the morning, they get up at 9. It's necessary to launch an ambush beginning at 4 in the afternoon, but they don't arrive there that day, only showing up the following day and verifying that the Tugas have already passed by. It's necessary to attack some barracks at 6 in the evening, but they arrive in the late hours of the night. Or again, if the attack were for midday, they arrive in the afternoon and leave it for the following day. They arrive the next day in the same conditions. Our comrades missed attacks or ambushes only because of tardiness countless times. Some instances of being late are justifiable because our conditions are difficult, but others are only late from a lack of interest, lack of consciousness, lack of order, and of decision. Sometimes one gives a comrade a mission to quickly take a letter to some location. Along the way, he finds some reason to have fun for 3 or 4 days, although it takes 1 day to arrive. It can't be like this. One cannot win a war this way, much less construct a land. We must have a notion of time, the security, political commissar, etc. Comrades have to be on time everywhere. Let no one come to me saying that he doesn't have a watch, and that's why he can't be on time. We don't need watches to arrive on time. We can decide to meet each other while the sun is high. There's sun in our land. When the rooster sings for the first time, one has to get up. When the sun is fully up, we have to go. A watch isn't necessary in order to respect time, comrades. Watches are for helping comrades a bit more. Our people lived during centuries without watches, but they did what they could, given the economic conditions in which they found themselves. It was not the watch that made the people of Europe advance, no. They went to work on time and advanced much. Thus, they created the watch, the modern watch, because everyone had the ancient watch. It's enough to impale the ground with a stick, and, according to the place of the shadow, one can know the hour. This is a sun watch. The shadow of a person can be a watch, because in the morning the shadow is to one side, and in the afternoon the shadow is on the other side. Many people think they lose their shadow at midday, because it is under their feet, but the sun is full and above us. We have to work a lot, comrades, in order to take advantage of time. We have to seek to be practical in our work. We have to instill the idea of practicality in the spirit of our comrades. It's necessary to stop complicating things, or to lose the magical interpretation of reality in our spirit. That is to say, we still have certain ways of thinking, that if we sit down and discuss a matter in which all are in agreement, we think that the thing is already done. We remain content, as if we had in fact done the thing, as if it were then necessary to throw a party because the discussion was really good. But the discussion finishes, and everyone leaves satisfied with life because they're going to do a good job. But they don't try to do it because it's only in their head. But if we observe closely, we see that that corresponds to our own life. We're convinced that Moors or sorcerers are capable of pointing a finger at us and making us fall over. Sooner or later, we'll see that it's a lie, that it's not capable of anything. But that's in our head. We think of it and we believe. And many other things besides these. Likewise, we think about an ambush and we are very satisfied, but we don't take a single practical measure for everything to run well, without flaws, because everything is good in our head, because we believe in our magical interpretation of reality. We have to combat this in our midst, and we all have to do so, as a few of our comrades do. We have to discuss, but also to correctly put it into practice properly without errors, because our misfortune is beginning and not ending. When we start some work, do it with complete enthusiasm. For example, we're going to make an underground storehouse to guard our material. We begin it with enthusiasm, but after a while, we stop and people forget. Look at how many things in independent Africa have begun but have not been finished. This is because, for us, it is enough to have a thing in our head, and soon one doesn't think of it anymore. We have planned out so many things in our struggle, in the political sphere, in the military sphere, in instruction, in health, that we don't do. We begin, but if a single difficulty arises, we don't advance. We have to combat this with vigor, with great vigor. We can give examples of many things that were begun that weren't finished. The peoples who began something and didn't finish, the organizations that began something and didn't finish, did so for either of two reasons. Either they recognized that it wasn't worth doing, or they weren't capable of finishing it. If they recognized that it wasn't worth doing, then they're doing something that they shouldn't be doing. They certainly studied the problem poorly. Before we begin to do something, we should study it well, in order to know if it's worth doing or not, and not begin to do it to put it aside later. This is a loss of energy and a waste. or at times it happens that one can't finish. But whoever can't finish a thing that they began to do is unfortunate in life because they can't do anything. We have to combat this, comrades. Thus, perfection, making good use of our time and having practical sense with our accomplishments, the capacity to bring every work, everything that we have to do to completion, are very important, fundamental in our culture, comrades. These are new elements for our land's culture, because even if an entire week were necessary to launch a well-planned ambush, we should do this, whether it takes an entire week or an entire month. We have to organize our troops in such a way that a group would always be on that road, patrolling, moving, etc. But it always has to be like this. If we know that the enemy should pass there, we shouldn't leave. It's necessary to complete the task. Not, as I told you, arriving, planning a great ambush, then waiting 1, 2, 3, or 4 hours, and the enemy doesn't come. Some say that they're coming, others that they're not coming, and they finish by heading out. Afterward, the enemy passes and goes to supply their barracks. It's the same thing on the rivers. The time of attack has to be the appointed time. If not, then why have an appointed time? An attack was appointed for 5 o'clock, but 5, 6 o'clock, even another day passes, and the attack isn't carried out. Why are the comrades playing around? For what? We appointed it for 5 o'clock, after having the certainty that it's even at 5. We appointed it at 10 after we had the certainty that it could be at 10. Moreover, knowing the enemy as we should know it, we know which time is the best to attack. We should take maximum advantage of this. We should be capable of issuing our resistance's propaganda. This is also a cultural act. We should do so by every means that we arranged. That's the very reason why one of the greatest victories of our party is our Radio Libertação, our newspaper, our press, our information, as much within our land as abroad. We all know the strength, the value that our party's broadcasting station has, which issues propaganda for our people and which we should be able to improve every day, because that's an essential element, an essential means for our propaganda, for propagating our resistance. And in the context of our action, we should raise high the flag against illiteracy in our land. We're happy because many comrades have already improved their knowledge in this struggle. Many grown men of our land learned to read and write, and even more young guys. Today, it's rare for a big group to show up that doesn't have anyone who knows how to read and write. But before there were many who didn't know how to read or write. There were many big groups in which almost no one knew how to read and write. We should reinforce cooperative learning every day. But there are many comrades who have reached the 2nd grade, the 1st grade, the 2nd year, and even doctors who can pass days on end with other comrades without doing anything, or even resting during spare time, lying down or telling stories, without remembering to say, "Comrades, you don't know anything. Come here and I'm going to teach you." Or if you know a bit, come so I can teach you more than a bit. But the comrades don't think about this. They prefer to tell stories, to stroll through the forests, or in Conakry, or in Ziguinchor, or in Dakar. We should work hard to construct our life in our land, comrades. For example, and the party has already begun to do this, we should spread among our people the idea of cleanliness, of hygiene, as they say. Our people are clean. They like to bathe. They always like to brush their teeth, but not everyone. There are those who don't like these things much and can indeed bathe, but they get themselves into the mud afterward because of certain things. We have to work to show our people that their life, the prolongation of their life, also depends a lot on the cleanliness of their house. If a people lives mixed up with filth and other things, it's bad, because this environment is good for those insects that do harm to humans. They grow at will. For those flies and other insects that bring diseases. We should explain the norms of hygiene to our people. This is a fundamental aspect of our cultural resistance. We began with our health brigades, but to where did these lead us? We accomplished little work in relation to what was necessary to do, but the political commissar should be an agent of hygiene. The commander of the armed forces should be an agent of hygiene. Wherever one arrives, one should demand that they clean themselves. But even in bokeh, for example, or outside a home, the leading comrades who pass by encounter everyone dirty and don't say anything. Only one or another worry about cleanliness. It can't be so dirty. It's necessary to clean, to sweep. We have to develop this in our spirit, comrades. Cleanliness, hygiene. Every leader or militant of the party should be an agent of hygiene in our land. Wherever one arrives, he has to demand cleanliness. And as a good leader, he should be the first to grab a broom if necessary, in order to clean, in order to show the others that he's not embarrassed, that he's fighting for his land, giving his life for our struggle, but that he's not capable of living amidst filth because no one gets to cleaning, because to clean is to be demoted. How is it that this can indicate to our people the actual path for rising up, to get out of filth? Because if we want an answer to our struggle, if we can say that our struggle in Guinea and Cape Verde is in order to do away with all wretchedness, then we can also say that it's in order to do away with all messes. We have to put an end to all messes and promiscuity in our midst. When we've put an end to this, we will have already advanced a lot in our struggle. Indeed, we have told the comrades to convince our people to make latrines, for example. That's not to say that latrines are what exemplify progress. No, the latrine is no progress. A people that addresses their basic needs in the forest can be more advanced than a people who has latrines. But to the extent to which latrines have been made, they should be advancing in other fields, because when one moves this place of business farther away, they are preventing sicknesses among our people. Because we know that there are places where, for a person to pass, he has to hold his nose otherwise. But in other African countries, it's also like this. Even in a few cities, there are places where to pass by, it's necessary to hold one's nose. Filth on every side. We who are ready to die in a struggle for the progress and happiness of our people have to be capable of cleaning, because it's easier to clean than to die. Of course, we have to throw away everything in our schools insofar as it was made by the colonialists, everything that exemplifies the colonialist mentality. We have already begun to do it, editing new books, speaking of our party, of our struggle, of our land, of the present and future of our people, of our people's rights. There are comrades who think that in order to teach our children well, we shouldn't speak of our party. What history? A pedagogy that wants that is no pedagogy at all. Pedagogy for us is that which teaches our children about our struggle, the rights of our people, the party anthem, the value of our party. Beyond the ABCs, the cat and the fox, the wolf and the kid, etc. But the party should be present there as well. The direction of the party directors, the force of our struggle, the force of our people, the force of our party, the duties of our people. At school in my time, they taught the birth of Jesus Christ, that the Virgin Mary had a baby while remaining a virgin, and I even respected that, and even seemed to understand it in that time. They taught the miracle of the Ascension in the books espoused at that time, miracles like the miracle of roses and whatnot. If in that time they taught miracles to children, why can we not teach our land's greatest miracle, that men and women reunited to mobilize our people for struggle, to put an end to suffering, to misery, to wretchedness, to blows, kicks, forced labor, etc. Who isn't capable of understanding that? Any little kid is capable of understanding that. And we should make a professor of every party leader and every party militant who is knowledgeable. Comrades, it's not only a professor from the schools who has the obligation to teach. Anyone, a commander, member of the party management, political commissar, security commissar, nurse, anyone, has the obligation to teach, to always teach, speaking or clarifying, explaining, helping. Only thus can we move forward. We should not only leave the work of teaching to professors. We should take advantage of every conversation with a comrade. And the comrades who deal with me a lot, who know me well, know that it's like this, that I typically act like this in life. Every conversation with a comrade, no matter at what level it may be, should be made into a study, a lesson. one or another learns. All of our conversations have to be a lesson. Thus can we buy time and advance. But if we merely sit around telling stories about some sacred tree from Mansoa or somewhere else without thinking about learning, we lose time, and we don't advance, comrades. We should avoid the superiority complex of those who know something and the inferiority complex of those who don't know. This is because a person who is capable of teaching shouldn't distance themselves from anyone, especially from our people now. On the contrary, one should constantly immerse himself more among our people. I explained to the comrades, for example, to the comrades who go to study and return. Until now, there have been two tendencies. One is from those who come, who infiltrate our people, but get so muddled with our people that they only make the same mistakes as our people. Others come as graduated engineers, and later, they want to be directors. Was it Bobo Keita who ran things? But how? Bobo isn't at my level. I'm an engineer, and he hardly went to school. He had to wait outside. He only committed errors. He messed up our party work, ruined everything, etc. Those are the two extremes that we don't want. What we want is, for those who left to study, who acquired more knowledge, to respect our directors, because they are, in fact, the directors, even if they didn't go to school. But if one saw some deficiency, one should delve into the middle of the comrades in order to help to constantly raise, to improve the level of our things. This is what it means for a person to know more, who understood more than others, and who comes to help us. Mingle with and muddle around with yourselves. But don't forget that it's necessary to help rise up more each day. We should combat everything insofar as it may be opportunism, even in culture. For example, there are comrades who think that in order to teach in our land, it's fundamental to still teach in Creole. Then others think that it's better to teach in Fula, in Mandinga, in Balanta. This is very pleasant to hear. If the Balantas hear this, they will be very happy, but it's no longer possible. How are we going to write in Balanta now? Who knows Balanta phonetics? One still doesn't know, and it's necessary to study first, even Creole. For example, I write, Nea Nabai. Another can write, for example, Naka Nabai. It makes no difference. One can't teach like this. In order to teach a written language, it's necessary to have a certain way of writing it so that everyone writes in the same way. Otherwise, it's a diabolic mess. But many comrades with a sense of opportunism want to move forward with Creole. We're going to do that, but after studying a lot. Now, our language for writing is Portuguese. That's why it's worth it to talk to each other here as much in Portuguese as in Creole. We're not better children of our land if we speak Creole. That's not true. But the child of our land is the one who abides by the party's laws, the party's orders, in order to serve our people well. No one should have a complex because one doesn't know Balanta, Mandinga, Pepel, Fula, or Menkanha. If one knows, even better. But if one doesn't know, one has to make sure that others understand, even if by gestures. But if one is working hard in the party, one moves forward. Because who knows more Manjaco than the traitor Joaquim Badacan? Who knows more Fula than the traitor Senesane? Who knows more Fula hypocrisies than the traitor Cherno Rashid? Comrades, be patient. But who knows more Balanta than the traitor Fuab? We have to have the courage to report clear things to the comrades. Our values all right, but without opportunism. We have to have a real sense of our culture. Portuguese, the language, is one of the best things that the Tugas left us, because language isn't evidence of anything, but an instrument for men to relate with one another, a means for speaking, to express realities of life and of the world. Just as man invented the radio to speak at a distance, without speaking with language but only with signals, so too through the time of his development man began to speak. The necessity to intercommunicate made him begin to speak. He developed vocal cords, etc., until he could speak. And as language depends on the environment in which one lives, Every people created their own language. If we notice, for example, the people who live near the sea, their language has many things related to the sea. For those who live in the forest, their language has many things related to woodlands. A people that lives in the forest, for example, doesn't know how to say boat, isn't familiar with boats, and don't live on the sea. For example, in the language of certain European peoples, they say things about the sea or about navigation in Portuguese because the Portuguese live along the sea. Everything has its reason. Language is an instrument that man created through labor, through struggle, in order to communicate with others. And this gave him a great new strength because no one was closed in on himself anymore. They began to speak with one another, men with men, societies with societies, people with people, country with country, continent with continent. How wonderful! Language was the first natural means of communication that existed. But the world advanced a lot. We didn't advance as much as the world. Our language remained at the level of that world to which we arrived, in which we live. Whereas the Tuga, although he was a colonialist living in Europe, had a language that advanced a good bit more than ours, being able to express concrete and relative truths, for example, with science. For example, we speak like this. The moon is the Earth's natural satellite. Natural satellite. They say this in Balanta, they say it in Mankanha. It's necessary to talk a lot in order to say it. It's possible to say it. But it's necessary to talk a lot until it becomes clear that a satellite is a thing that revolves around another, whereas in Portuguese, one word suffices. Speaking like that, any people in the world understands. And mathematics. We want to learn mathematics, don't we? Take, for example, the square root of 36. How does one say square root in Balanta? It's necessary to tell the truth in order to really understand. I say, for example, the intensity of a force is equal to mass times the acceleration of gravity. How are we going to say this? How does one say acceleration of gravity in our language? It doesn't exist in Creole. We have to say it in Portuguese. But for our land to advance, every child of our land in the next few years has to know what the acceleration of gravity is. I won't explain this now because there's no time and we have a lot of work. But comrades, tomorrow, in order to seriously advance, not only the directors, but also all of the 9-year-olds have to know what the acceleration of gravity is. In Germany, for example, all the children know this. There are many things that we can't say in our language, but there are people who want us to put the Portuguese language to the side because we're Africans and we don't want a foreigner's language. Those people want their mind to advance. They don't want to make their people advance. We of the party, if we want to lead our people forward for a long time to come, to write, to advance in science, our language has to be Portuguese. And this is an honor. It's the only thing we can appreciate from the Tuga because he left his language after having stolen so much from our land. Until an actual day in which, having deeply studied Creole, finding all of the good phonetic rules for Creole, we could begin to write Creole. But we don't prohibit anyone from writing in Creole. If someone wants to write in Creole, if someone wants to write a letter to their love in Creole, they can write it. It's only that in the response one sends, one is going to write in a different way, but making oneself clearly understood. But for science, Creole doesn't yet suffice, even in Balanta. I remember a comrade of ours who unfortunately died, Ongo. We would write in Portuguese and then switch to Creole, and he would write in Balanta. This is because it's possible to write in Balanta. A person who knows enough Portuguese is capable of writing Balanta. They say, for example, Watna, or at times, Nicolosa. I know how to write it, but I write it in my way. Yet another person writes it in their way. Even Jarama in Fula can be written with a D and a J, or it can be written only with a J. But we read Jarama because the J at the beginning of the word is equivalent to DJ. But we have to set up a rule as in Mandinga or in other languages. It's necessary to first set up a rule. It has to be like this, comrades, because we have to take absolute advantage of other people's experiences, not only our own experience. But if we want to employ that experience in order to utilize it in our land, we have to utilize the expressions of other languages. Well, if we have a language that can explain all this, let's use it. It does no harm. For us, using Portuguese, like Russian, French, or English, doesn't matter as long as it serves us, just as using tractors from the Russians, English, Americans, etc. doesn't matter, as long as they serve us in cultivating the land while gaining our independence. That's because language is an instrument. But it might happen that we already have a language that works and that everyone understands. So we're not going to make everyone learn Russian. It's not worth it, especially since we have the Creole language, which is similar to Portuguese. If in our schools we teach our students how Creole comes from Portuguese and from Africa, anyone will know Portuguese much more quickly. Creole impairs those who learn Portuguese because they don't know what linkage exists between Portuguese and Creole. But if they become familiar with the linkage that exists, this facilitates in learning Portuguese. We have to end all of our people's indifference in cultural matters, with steadfastness in our decisions and in our determination to do things. We have already managed to combat this, and we should not avoid something because it's from a foreigner, or again, because it's foreign. If it's already good and we have to accept it immediately, then it's not worth refusing. That's not culture. It's crazy. It's a complex, be it one of inferiority or stupidity. Faced with things from the foreigner, we should know how to accept what is acceptable and refuse what isn't useful. We have to be capable of raising criticisms. And if you will notice, in a part of our action, our struggle has been the constant application of the principle of critical assimilation, that is, availing ourselves of others, but criticizing what can be useful for our land and that which cannot. Accumulating experience and creating. These are a few aspects of our cultural resistance in the cultural sphere, of which I wanted to speak to you, comrades. Chapter 6. Armed Resistance. Comrades. A part of our work yesterday and today was dedicated to clearly putting forward the problem of our resistance in general, as a response to Portuguese colonial oppression, and to define, although quickly, various forms of our struggle's resistance, every form being a type of response to a type of Portuguese oppression: politics, response, political resistance; economic oppression, response, economic resistance; cultural oppression, response, cultural resistance. We're only missing talking a bit about our armed resistance, which is a response to armed oppression, to colonialist aggression. The comrades clearly know about this in general. It's more visible than the other types of resistance. We already talked about the beginning of our armed resistance. We told the comrades that our armed resistance, on one hand, is a political act, because the war that we're waging in our land is a response to the Tugas's war. But above all, it's the only way we found to win our political rights of self-determination, for our people to determine their own destiny and to advance like other peoples of the world in the path of progress. Even today, you'll remember that our armed resistance is also an expression of our cultural resistance, because, with our armed resistance and risking our lives every day, we negate the situation of second-class Portuguese people, if not of third-class people, or of the Portuguese dogs that the Portuguese colonialist foreigners would like to impose. We who, through the labor of our party, acquire the awareness that we're a part of the African people, that we belong to this continent called Africa, that, although we're men like all other men, profoundly tied to humanity, our destiny is first of all tied to Africa, and as Africans and as men, we have the right to a dignified and free life, like the people of Portugal or any other people of the world. Our personality isn't confused with the personality of the Tugas, although some of us may have children from Tugas, or descendants from Tugas mixed with Africans, and although we don't scorn the Tugas, we want our dignity, our personality, not only in defense of our rights, but also of that which is the legitimate basis of our people's culture. We even show the comrades that, at the end of the day, our armed resistance can be interpreted as a prolongation of our people's resistance, in Guinea particularly, because Guinea was conquered by the Tugas, to the war of colonial conquest, which took almost 50 years in our land. Today we take up arms again, continuing the work of our ancestors, who didn't want to lose their right to direct themselves from their own life. In relation to Cape Verde, we can interpret our struggle, which is still political today, but possibly armed tomorrow as well, as the prolongation of the resistance of those Africans, the children of Guinea or of any other side of Africa close to Guinea, who were taken to Cape Verde as slaves and who, as slaves, resisted and suffered, negating and fighting against the Tuga slave drivers who sold them in America, in Brazil, and in other parts of the world as if they were insects. Thus, we should conclude that the primary aspect of our armed resistance is the prolongation of a struggle in the sense of the defense of our dignity as Africans. We have, therefore, a tradition of struggle in order to defend our freedom, the rights of our society, and our own history in order to follow the path of progress like any other people in the world. We know who we are. We already spoke about this a lot. We clearly defined our situation geographically, economically, culturally, and socially before and after the Tugas arrived in our land. That is, before the colonial situation and after the colonial situation. We're part of a set of peoples of the African continent who, from the moment that the path from Asia, from the Orient, through the Mediterranean was closed off by the Turkish Empire, which conquered Southern Europe, Eastern Europe, and Asia Minor, encountered Europe because Europe, surrounded by the Turks, needed to open new paths in order to reach the riches of Asia that they were used to buying, negotiating over, and exploiting. From this moment on, and because they were situated at the tip of Europe upon the sea, the Portuguese in particular initiated their so-called discoveries, navigations. The Tuga crazily thought himself to be God, who parted the seas in order to discover lands, in order to discover new worlds. This is a lie. The Tugas headed out to sea, first, because they are seaside. Secondly, because Portugal was poor and had a lot of people to employ as sailors, contrary to other countries in Europe, which had fewer people available for life on the sea. And thirdly, but fundamentally, because Europe had the absolute necessity of heading out to sea to look for a path to the Indies. No god outlined a way to the sea for the Tugas. It's enough to see that, after this finished, the Tugas became poor, wretched, and had a smaller navy than any other country in the world that didn't have a navy. We should put this clearly, which were the facts that led to our contact with the Tugas. At the outset, the Tugas had contact with African peoples on the basis of equality and, in a few cases, even on the basis of the inferiority of the Tugas, because a few African countries at that time were truly more developed than Portugal. We already told you that the king of Ghana, for example, or of Mombasa or Malindi on the East African coast, and the king of the Congo were a bit frightened at the misery of the Tugas, with the presents that their king gave them compared to the presents that they could give to the king of Portugal. There are beautiful letters that the kings of Portugal wrote to the kings of Africa to petition good relations with them, lauding them, offering themselves with respect, and this has already been demonstrated. The Portuguese kings always gave their hidden orders, recommending that their people take note on the best way to trick, to steal, etc. The Tugas had relations with us, Africans, commercial relations on the coast of our African lands, on the basis of equality and of respect. Even after a good while, in Guinea, for example, there were signed agreements between the Pepple kings and the Portuguese for business. And in order to trade in our land or in other parts of Africa, the Tugas paid taxes, like other countries as a matter of fact, which later transformed into colonialist and imperialist countries. Little by little, Europe transformed itself. It advanced from the commercial point of view. It developed industrially, above all, England, and new needs were created in Europe with the great development of capitalism. Accumulation of capital, the need for new raw materials so they could develop even more and so they could respond to Europe's miseries, and at the same time, the necessity of markets so they could sell things that Europe produced. Before this, because of the wars that existed in Africa, even between Africans themselves, our land's area was also an area of many wars, above all from Futa Jalon inland, where various aristocratic military African states fought among each other in order to conquer terrains for pasture, farming, etc. There were many prisoners of war who were used as slaves. Even in Africa, the social and economic system was one of slavery, although with its own characteristics, and different from slavery on other continents. The system of slavery still exists today in Africa. While things have gotten a little better, the boys of a small territory's leader are no more than slaves, comrades. The boys of some of our land's greats in the forest are like slaves. They're given food, they have children, but all of the children are raised by that same great man. Their children's children are always servants. This is called slavery. So for we Africans, regarding our idea of slavery, we were open to arranging slaves for other people. At that time, America had been discovered, and some time later, it began to be colonized. Brazil in South America, islands like Cuba, Jamaica, the so-called West Indies, some countries in Latin America, above all in Central America and, as I said, North America, colonized by the English. In Brazil and in the southern part of North America, where the climate was a bit harsh, even quite abnormal, agriculture took a path requiring serious labor. And the Europeans who left Europe in order to go colonize were really thin because they were expelled from Europe, persecuted because of their religion, because of the class struggle in Europe. So these people, not wanting to pick up a hoe to cultivate the earth, went out around the world to procure people to cultivate for them. Africa was an open field for this because slavery existed in Africa, and Africans were accustomed to buying and selling slaves. And so the Tugas, navigators of the Atlantic Ocean, and others like the French, the Dutch, etc., accustomed to pirating on the sea, instead of stealing by sea or on land, instead of pirating, began to buy or to hunt slaves in Africa in order to sell them in America or the New World. A new type of commerce began: slavery. Slavery lasted for quite some time, during which more than 100 million Africans were sold around the world, many of whom, in large part, according to investigations, died in the middle of the ocean, or from frailty, or in shipwrecks. African men and women were carried to different points of the world, above all to America. After a while, quarrels began between the English and also a few other countries of Europe, on one hand, and America on the other hand, due to economic competition. This is because America raised itself up on the basis of capacities, those of slave labor, whereas in England, for example, which did not have slaves, it was necessary to pay a salary for a hard day's work. Thus in England, there arose the idea of ending slavery, not as a feeling of humanity, but as an economic necessity for combating the advance of America's development. Great theories were thrown around that slavery was a crime against humanity. It's true, it's a crime, but it was a crime a long time ago. It's necessary to end slavery, great propaganda, international meetings, etc., until they reached the point in which slavery was prohibited. But Portugal, which was already stubborn in that time, was continuing with its business of slavery for quite some time, with a good-sized repository of slaves on the Cape Verde Islands in the Atlantic Ocean. Others were taken to Portugal. In Portugal, there are places that have black names because there were many slaves there. For example, there is the Poço dos Negros, because there were many blacks guarded as slaves there, and after the end of slavery, they became free, continuing to live in Portugal. Even in the Alentejo, there is a village where there are many mulatto persons, descendants of Africans that Marquês de Pombal sent there in order to populate the Alentejo. Combating slavery in Europe, the ideas of slaves' freedom advanced in America, and slavery was prohibited in the world. In North America, the North was industrialized, and the South produced raw materials on the basis of the slave labor force. In order to defend the industrial and economic interests of the North, the idea of putting an end to slavery arose in order to remove the great lords, masters of the lands and slaves of the South, the capacities of life that harmed the interests of the industrial masters of the North. Thus, Lincoln, president of Northern America, decided to put an end to slavery. There was a war due to this. The South immediately declared that it no longer made up part of the United States, that it didn't want any federation whatsoever, and that it was going to be an independent state, keeping its slaves. War arose, a hard war between Americans and Americans, saying that it was due to the slaves because the North wanted to liberate the slaves. Lie. The North wanted to put an end to the prerogatives of the South, which had slaves and they didn't have them. And if we study this well, we'll even notice that the Europeans' origins in North America were of one sort, and in the South, they were of another sort. Names of the lands in North have a certain origin, and in the South, they have another. In the South, there are terms from France and from other countries, because Americans, as you all know, aren't from America. Americans, in fact, are the Indians, almost all of whom were killed by Europeans. The so-called American Indians were not Indians at all. They were redskins that were called Indians because when Christopher Columbus discovered America, he thought that he had arrived in India. And when he saw people, he called them Indians, and this name stuck. But they aren't Indians at all. Comrades. A new phase in the world arose, in which slavery came to an end. The world became transformed with this. Nevertheless, capitalism developed a lot in Europe, with great accumulations of capital, industrial development, the need for raw materials, as I told you, the need for markets. And so some of the more developed European states settled on the following. To take Africa, in fact, to put an end to the history of small business, small contracts, and respect for the Africans. European states, England, Germany, France, and Belgium, for example, began to quarrel in order to see who was going to take Africa. They looked for ways to partition Africa, first on the basis of the companies that were created, after that by means of the states themselves, and then through colonial wars of occupation. The history is long. I'm not going to narrate everything, but that's how our lands became colonies, occupied by colonialists. But from that moment on, whether or not we were developed or advanced in relation to Europe, our history stopped. We began to be dragged by the history of European countries. Our history, our freedom, and the freedom of our productive forces were taken and stifled by the colonialists. They clearly had great ease with this course because we were always divided. You know that in Guinea, for example, the Tugas fought against us one by one, defeating us one by one, race by race, and utilizing some races against others. We can say that, if by chance some Manjacos hadn't helped the Tugas against our own Manjacos, perhaps it would have been difficult for the Tugas to conquer the Manjacos. We can say that, if the Fulas hadn't helped the Tugas against the Pepels, and above all, if Honorio Barreto hadn't tricked the Pepels of Bissau, serving the Tugas, then perhaps, comrades, the Tugas wouldn't have settled in our land. Many people don't quite understand the role that Honorio Barreto played in the conquest of Guinea by the Tugas. Honorio Barreto, son of Lady Rosa de Cacheu, wife of João Barreto of Santiago, Cape Verde, sergeant of a troop of Portuguese men, black, born in Guinea and descendants of Cape Verdeans, a mixture between Cape Verdeans and Manjacos. As a matter of fact, they say that Lady Rosa is the daughter of a Cape Verdean and a Manjaco, that she, Lady Rosa, was taken to Cape Verde, the master of Cacheu and of indigenous peoples of Africa, from the side of Teixeira Pinto, Cacheu, etc., to the end of Casamansa, that is, until the river that in that time was called the São Domingos River, and that is the Casamansa River today. She was so affectionate among the Africans that everything she said was accepted. She was practically the master of commerce. Her son, Honorio Barreto, was educated first in Cape Verde and afterward in Portugal. He didn't finish his studies, was a good guitar player, a bit of a playboy, and he returned to Guinea in order to take care of the country's things. João Barreto had been a prisoner before this because he launched a revolt against the governor who was there because he was a Democrat, not for independence, but in favor of other Portuguese people who were Democrats. After the death of his father, Honorio Barreto took care of the family's things, and he was the richest man in Guinea. Facing the revolt of the Pepels, In that time, Guinea and Cape Verde had only one government with headquarters in Praia. The Governor-General of Cape Verde and Guinea made a proposal to the Queen, who was Di Maria in that time, in which they said that if she wanted Guinea to remain peaceful and Portugal to be a serious force in Guinea to put an end to the wars, it was better to install Honorio Barreto as governor. He wrote this to Di Maria and said, "I have the honor to propose to our Queen to choose as the governor of Guinea, although under my orders the young man named Honorio Barreto, learned, intelligent, who frequently attends school, etc., and who is as Portuguese as any of us. And I advise this because, being the richest person in Guinea, he has the greatest interest in conserving the presence of Portugal in Guinea." The Queen saw this, and Honorio Barreto was named governor of Guinea. Honorio Barreto established a working plan to conquer Guinea by the Tugas. If he could really take Cacheu, Geba, and Bissau for the Tugas, no one else would be capable of taking Guinea, and they could dominate all of the indigenous revolts. He saw this plan very well, with intelligence. But when, for example, the Portuguese were gripped by anger at him because he was black and commanded, he played a great trick. He abandoned everything and returned to his property in Cacheu and closed himself up in his house. When the Portuguese had difficulties with the indigenous peoples, they went to call for him in order to avoid the Pepels revolting against them. He returned. One time, for example, the king of Intim, whose name is Ndongo, one of the strongest Pepel kings, surrounded Amura, São José de Bissau's fortress, with his people. And it was in that way that the Portuguese died of hunger there inside. No one could leave. The ships didn't arrive in Bissau. Honorio Barreto was in Cacheu, and they went to call for him. People from Cape Verde, Tugas who were in Cape Verde, came to call for him. He accepted this and came to speak with the Pepel king and promised him that his rights would be respected, that Portugal would in no way take his land, and that he would pay him taxes, etc. A written contract was even drawn up. Meanwhile, the Tugas arranged that great forces would leave from Portugal, from Lisbon, for Guinea. When they arrived, they massacred the Pepels on a large scale. Another time, in a contract to not bother the Tugas that Honorio Barreto made with the ruler of Juderay, that island in front of Bissau, the following promise was made, that king wouldn't meddle with the Tugas. He wouldn't make war against them. The Tugas were going to give him so many firearms, so many iron bars and liters of sugarcane per year. This is in a signed contract, archived in Lisbon, which I read. I am giving you an idea of how Honorio Barreto in fact knew how to serve Portugal well. With his plans, he was in fact able to place Guinea in his hands, to deliver it over, or not to the Tugas, according to what he might want. Because in that time, in which he had Guinea completely in his hands, the English and the French, who also wanted Guinea, appeared as well. The English wanted Bolama, and the French wanted to come down from Casamansa, descending and taking everything. Honorio Barreto was a great Portuguese patriot. He resisted with strength, accepted neither promises nor offers that the French and English made to him, and he guarded all of Guinea for the Tugas. The Tugas are right to put a statue of Honorio Barreto in our land. Without Honorio Barreto in Guinea, there wouldn't be any Tugas. This is true. But we should have respect for Honorio Barreto. We can criticize him in his attitude, but he was a man of valor. For that time, with that mentality, as an individual who left our people, but who was educated by the Portuguese, among the Portuguese, speaking Portuguese well, playing his guitar, singing fado, etc., he didn't have anything else to do if not this, comrades. This was his job, and he did it well. Thus, he was a man of valor. We can't understand some of our lineages today without Honorio Barreto, for example, like Alvarenga, because Lady Rosa called herself Rosa Alvarenga. João Barreto and Rosa Alvarenga bore the name Carvalhos Alvarenga so and so Barreto, joining a whole two families, forming fine people of our land like our comrade Barreto seated over there. But today, In the face of this new phenomenon of the struggle of our people and for the independence of Africa, the independence of the whole world, with struggles of liberation everywhere, we can't understand how any descendant of Honorio Barreto could still favor the Tugas. If Honorio Barreto could serve the Tugas, then perhaps any one of us would have preferred to do it if we had his education and if we had lived in that historical moment in which he lived. But today, Honorio Barreto's descendants, whether or not they went to school, if they still favor the Tugas, then those people don't yet have forgiveness. Thus, you comrades see where we have departed from and how we fell into the Tugas' hands. When it comes to Cape Verde, you comrades know, there was no conquest of Cape Verde. Cape Verde doesn't consist of islands that were found in that time by the Tugas. After they happened upon the tip of Africa where today Dakar is located, and given its greenery, well, at the time it was discovered it was quite green, and it's a cape, that is, a piece of land that enters the sea from inland. They called it Cape Verde. Today they call that tip Dakar. After a few days, heading out to sea, they came across some islands, and as they were close to Cape Verde, every island took its own name. That which was discovered in the month of May they called Ilha de Mayo. That which was discovered on the day of St. James was the Ilha de Santiago. That which had really salty terrain became Ilha do Sal. Another, because it was long and beautiful, they called Ilha da Boa Vista, etc., according to the Tugas Christianity, according to their way of seeing. But you know that they call the region in which Dakar is located Région du Cap Vert. In Dakar, one sees a lot of things where Cap Vert is written, and people think that Cape Verde is there, and it's because of this that I'm giving you this explanation. There was no one in Cape Verde at the time in which it was discovered. But there's a hypothesis in which Cape Verde had people before, particularly people from the African coast. As many Manjacos as Libas, Lebu fishermen from the coast of Senegal, had reached as far as Cape Verde, navigating in their canoes. And today, these canoes are tested, and they're able to navigate long distances, like the Nominka canoes, for example. Moreover, there is the historical hypothesis that Phoenicians were an ancient people who inhabited the land of the Lebanese, who we call Syrians, who are in Asia Minor, and who made the so-called tour around Africa. They say that they got to Cape Verde and that they lived there. The truth is that when the Tugas came across the islands of Cape Verde in the middle of the sea, they didn't find anyone there. And when slavery thrived, they resolved to bring slaves there to make Cape Verde a repository of slaves. When slavery began to come to an end, every island was placed in the hands of an important white man, a Sir something or other, as an administrative recipient, master of the island, who made it so that slaves would be exploited as slaves, or anyhow exploited as servants, as serfs in the house of the land's master. This was the point from where we started, the situation that the Tugas created in Africa. Knowing our starting point well, we have to know clearly where we are going with our armed struggle. Our armed struggle, we say, is a form of political struggle that seeks to liberate our land from imperialist colonial economic exploitation. This is our fundamental objective, to liberate our land's productive forces from oppression, from imperialist colonial domination. But one question, are we doing this to return to where we were, to return to Cape Verde as slaves, or as serfs, or with people serving as servants? Are we doing this to return to the time in which the Manjacos and Pepos quarreled a lot, in which the Mandingas and Balantas didn't get along? This is a bit difficult. No, we're liberating our land to advance like other peoples of the world, for progress, for a life of dignity, for our land's unity, nationally, so we can help to raise up a new and better Africa. That's the objective of our struggle in the context of the world and of humanity, to which we belong as human beings. In our struggle, therefore, any shot at Buba's barracks or a shot taken at some Tuga on the road or in an ambush is a political act of great magnitude. We're serving humanity, comrades. We're serving our people, our land, Africa, and humanity. This is our responsibility to shoot, to wage war in our land, in order to liberate our people. For this very reason, we have to orient our armed struggle in the best way possible, in accordance with our land's reality and in accordance with the experience of other peoples as well, as long as that experience can be valid for us. For this very reason, we have to avoid, and we do avoid, everything in our struggle, insofar as it might diminish the dignity of the human being. In our struggle, our party prohibits everything that might be a crime, everything that, in our spirit, might be hateful or a desire for blood. We spill blood, and we have hatred for the colonialist who dominates us, knowing what we're doing, clearly, in order not to confuse us, comrades. This is why we have difficulties with our brothers, the Felupes, joining us, because according to them, when someone is killed in war, it's necessary to cut off their head and ears. This is a bit difficult for us. It's easy for the Tugas. This is why our war is very different from many wars in Africa, comrades. Our enemy, who is criminal in the worst sense, barbaric, from the worst kind of people, from the worst people to appear on earth, feels shame before the purity and elevated consciousness of our armed struggle for national liberation. In our struggle, we have to combat all false ideas, all ideas of opportunism, and we have to defend our party line to the utmost, as you all know. Our party realized that it was necessary to mobilize and organize the people for struggle, and it mobilized the people. This had to be the first phase of our struggle, and we carried it out well, comrades. We created armed groups almost naturally, rooted among our people, supported by our people. These groups grew little by little. We acted against the enemy, developing our struggle step by step, creating new types of fighting groups, improving our weapons, and always supported by our people. We did the most we could to understand the war in every part of our land, and today only bringing the armed struggle to the islands remains. Bissau Island, Balama Island, the Bijagos Archipelago, and the Cape Verde Archipelago. There is no longer any place in our land where we haven't waged armed struggle. Even in Bissau, we already attacked Balama. The Tugas said this on their radio. Throughout our armed struggle and armed resistance, we have to be able to conserve our forces, but to also develop our forces every day. Those who wage an armed resistance but aren't able to conserve their forces and to constantly develop and grasp them will lose them, because one either develops and advances an armed struggle's forces, or then they disappear. To always be in action is the best way to develop forces. The armed struggle, armed resistance, is almost like gymnastics. Whoever has the most strength can perform the most gymnastics, the most action, the most movement. Unfortunately, many of our comrades don't understand this, and they're capable of wasting more and more time without taking any action, thus killing our armed forces, because the less action a combatant undertakes, the more difficulties he has in undertaking other actions. Step by step, we managed to lead our people to take up arms in 3 phases. First phase, a few of our people's children, whether in the forest or the city, as guerrillas. Little by little, we increased the number of guerrillas. We transformed the guerrilla forces into a regular army. But afterward, even in the villages, we put arms in the hands of the people as a militia. And today, little by little, we should put arms in the hands of our entire people. Our people in the liberated areas, at least. The people in arms. That should be a fundamental characteristic of our armed resistance, of a people that struggles for its liberty. What is the objective? To destroy the enemy's forces, to arrange all the necessary means to destroy the vital forces of the enemy. The war is hard. It's not pleasant, but no one wages war because of taste. Only a criminal kills because of a taste for killing. But the war is for killing, comrades. Whoever kills more in the war and whoever makes fewer errors wins the war. That's why the objective of our armed resistance is to liquidate the enemy's vital forces. Our obligation is to liquidate the colonialist Tugas. Whichever Tuga might bear arms against our people, against our people's liberty, should be liquidated. And through our struggle, We should orient our labor in such a way as to lose less of our strength. In fact, our party has sought to use fighting tactics beyond our general strategy in such a way as to avoid as much as possible our comrades dying in war. In our war, we should do what is possible in every stage, but preparing ourselves today to do better in the following stage. This has been the norm of our party. We've recommended maximum caution to our comrades in acting against the enemy in the moment in which we can actually act, because the land is ours. But we should always act because it's always possible to act in certain conditions that we ourselves can create. As much as possible, we have sought to conserve the life of our comrades. And we can say that a large part of the comrades that we already lost in our struggle was due to errors committed by their own comrades. Errors of vigilance, errors of war calculations, or even disobedience of the party's watchwords. Carelessness on paths that can be mined, carelessness crossing rivers that can have enemy boats. Countless times comrades arrive to cross a river, and instead of communicating with the well-marked other side, in order to watch out for the enemy, they arrive, get in a canoe, and cross over. Along the way, they encounter the Tugas. Even I, when crossing the Farim River, returning from the north of our land, before arriving to the other side, an enemy boat appeared in the corner of the river. When our feet touched ground amidst the mangroves, the boat came behind us, and we knew that Comrade Luis Cabral had to get into the water, almost dying with other comrades, because the enemy boat was on top of them. And how many of our comrades lost their lives because of this? Only carelessness, inattention, uncertainty, that one only does something well if it has been studied well. There's too much trust in luck. There were comrades who died in bombardments, for example, due to inattention, carelessness with planes, and refusal to follow the party's rules, to make shelters, to leave the bases. People die in war. It's normal to die in war. Whoever heads into war knows that they can live or die, but they'll die more or less depending on the errors they commit, depending on whether or not they follow the direction of the party line, or of who directs the line, so that they can preserve their life. And preserving life doesn't mean cowardice. It doesn't mean denying the war. So many comrades already died outside of the war during this struggle, but so many comrades have also already died abroad. And perhaps if they had been in our land, they wouldn't have died. Comrades who are sometimes on the front lines for years, one day drop what they're doing and go to their village. Just when they arrive, the Tugas kill us. So we shouldn't be afraid of dying in the war, but dying with success, with utility, not dying for nothing only because one trusts luck. We're proud of the fact that in the war, compared with other wars, whether in Africa or outside Africa, very few people have died. Very few people in respect to those who could have died given our concrete conditions. Our party has known how to orient the struggle, reducing to a minimum the loss of our comrades. And we have done the most we could for the recuperation of those who are injured. This is one of the strengths of our struggle. So we shouldn't only defend ourselves, always acting, because the best defense in an armed struggle like ours is action. The best defense is offense. But we should also defend all of our struggle's achievements. Although, we shouldn't confuse remaining attached to terrain only to defend a liberated area, instead of moving forward and attacking the Tugas in their barracks. We should create our own means of defending liberated areas, but the liberated areas can't impede us from advancing on the enemy to strike them constantly. To the extent that the war advances, our party has been able to transform our war's structure. Our comrades should really bear in mind what our struggle was at the outset. Little by little, we modified our guerrilla groups. We created army corps or military units. We created commandos, and we began to coordinate the struggle in the framework of zones of different regions. Before, for example, the Armed Forces Command was the party committee. But to the extent that our armed forces grew, the war advanced, and we had to separate the local directorate from the party directorate of armed forces, although those who directed the armed forces were also the party leaders. We created a strike force, an army corps, moving through sectors of struggle, etc. And all this shows the comrades how our struggle has been dynamic. And one of the strengths of our struggle is the following. We've never let our struggle crystallize, that is, stop at a given stage of evolution. On the contrary, we've always known how to adapt the struggle to its new conditions. We've known how to move from the pistol to the mortar, but that was also modifying every structure until we reached the mortar. We've known how to change the types of struggle, moving to new battlefronts in the moment in which it was necessary to do so. Of course, sometimes, in our conditions, this was a bit late, but sometimes we commit errors, such as, for example, when we created overcrowded units that we called sections, which we later had to reduce. Vitorino, for example, etc., which we later had to divide because there were too many people for the leadership at that time. We couldn't do it. We stuck with the big groups. But we should say that, in a war like ours, in a land like ours, the best way to fight is with few people divided into small groups. Consider the attack a few days ago in Pitch after the meeting we had with the comrades in Gabu. We were happy with Comrade Barosedi with the attack that he launched, but we told him that he could still do better. He actually got fed up at a whim, he and Bonte Nasansa, who is his political commissar. After that meeting, he returned with his combat ants and attacked Piche with two groups of 18 people, entering inside the Tugas barracks, grabbing the Tugas inside the shelters, blowing up a few houses, etc. That is, we're still certain that, in this struggle, the best way to fight is with small groups and with a lot of courage, getting the most out of our arms, above all our small arms, comrades. Unfortunately, since we've had mortars, as I already told you, the infantry comrades take some liberties, and the Pachanga bullets are rusting in the carrier. But you see, the party directorate was struggling, and you know what it was doing. For example, it was removing people from the infantry, bringing them to other army corps, and taking them to other places. And our commanding and director comrades, fortunately, understand this clearly in order to help us. It's not worth it to have 5 big groups to throw the Tugas out of the Buba area or the Kubukare area, when if we join 2 big groups, 2 on one side and 3 on the other, making 5, in order to throw the Tugas out of the Buba area or the Kubukare area. We can then take them to the north in order, for example, to reinforce our action in the Manjaco's land, or in Nakra, which is incredibly important for us. So we should do this at every step, yesterday, as today, and tomorrow, while our struggle lasts. Coordinate our struggle, dominate our struggle completely, knowing what's going on. And we should do everything so that the relations between our armed forces and our people might be the best possible. We should convince our people, by our gestures, by our action, by our words, that our soldiers, our combatants, are their children who struggle to defend them, who go out because of their heart and because of their gut in order to defend them, not to do them any harm. Various comrades of the armed forces, even leaders, have harmed our party and our struggle a lot, ruining the relations of our armed forces with the population. This, as I already told you, is a crime of treason. It's serving the Tugas. We have to be hard in combating this, in all seriousness. And I can say the following to the comrades. No matter how much strength our party has, if we don't defend good relations with our people every day, if we don't reinforce these relations more every day, through political work and concrete acts on the part of our armed forces, then our struggle will be condemned to failure. Whether in recruiting new people for the armed forces, in obtaining the support of the population, or even in justifying our sacrifices, it's fundamental to constantly develop good relations between the armed forces and our land's population, comrades. That means that we're not going to do harm. Where do we have to do harm in order to advance? We have to do it with patience, but not in the interest of one, with the delusions of one who wants to fight to deal blows or something. Everything in the interest of our own people. As I said, it's good to really and clearly spread the idea of where we're going in every moment of our armed struggle, in every moment of our struggle's progression. Our objective is to remove the Portuguese colonialists from our land in Guinea and in Cape Verde. Our idea, our goal, is not to stick it to the Tugas, to throw them to the ground like when we struggle with someone in a brawl in our land. Our objective is to remove the colonialists from our land. You saw the case of the war in Vietnam, which led to the independence of the Republic of North Vietnam. When they ended the war, with the victory of the Vietnamese at Dien Bien Phu, where they surrounded and defeated almost 30,000 Frenchmen, the French had 500,000 well-placed soldiers in Vietnam in every position. But due to the defeat at Dien Bien Phu, which was an enemy camp, and due to political pressure in the international sphere, France was obligated to concede. A few war officials became furious at this time, like General Salan and others. And why? Because the French still had a lot of strength, more strength than ever. Take the concrete case of Algeria. When Algeria reached independence through the negotiations in Evian, the French had never been so strong in Algeria. Everything was partitioned. French troops were everywhere. Hundreds of thousands of French troops over and above 1 million civilians, many with weapons in hand. But they gained independence because of political work, political pressure within the land, the great courage of the Algerian people, and the great sacrifice of peoples in the cities, comrades. For example, when the French prohibited all demonstrations in Algiers, whoever went out to the street would be killed. The Algerians, men, women, and children, young and old, rose up and went out into the street one Sunday with their flag held high. In one day, the French killed more than 600 Algerians in the streets of Algiers. On the following Sunday, they went out again. Comrades, it's necessary to have courage. We have to feel good about our war compared to the Vietnam or Algerian war. We almost never die. While we're waging war, our people in Bissau enjoy our victories. Madame So-and-so receives invitations from all over where we weren't accustomed to going, licenses to go to Portugal. Mr. Mamadou Jassi already appeared in the newspaper. Honorable Mrs. D. Mariama Kamara in Bissau, enjoying our struggle's successes. In Algeria, while the combatants were among the rocks, in the forest, or in the mountains, the population rose up with force in the city, demonstrating without weapons, showing the French that they had to get out. And as that provoked assassinations and massacres, world opinion, even in France, rose up against the French government. We can say that one of the largest forces that won the Algerian War was also French opinion itself, and Algeria's children in France, who numbered more than 500,000 and who conducted sabotages even in France. But as you know, many of them were also favorable to the French, to such an extent that the French killed Algerians as much in Algeria as in France. But they were forced by world opinion, by the courage of the Algerian people, by the sacrifice to which they had to consent. Because in the Algerian War, more than 1.5 million people died for their independence, comrades. 2 times the population of all of Guinea died in the Algerian War. 7.5 years of struggle. But the objective of a war of liberation isn't only for the enemy to ask forgiveness from us, to recognize that he lost. It's not that. It's for him to sit down and say that we're right, that we can take our land. That's why we have to know where we're going with our war. And however much more we beat the enemy, in every little battle in which we confront him, all the better, because the day will come more quickly when he decides to get out because everything is already really bad. In our land, fortunately, the Tuga knows that he lost, but he still doesn't leave. Don't forget, we still have to fight him. He knows that he has to hold on in order to also hold on to Angola and Mozambique. And he has to muster strength to hold on a bit, at least while we don't advance more with the struggle in Cape Verde. The day that our struggle begins in Cape Verde seriously is stretched wider, with weapons in hand. On that day, the war in our land will certainly end. But that doesn't mean that it might not end without a struggle beginning in Cape Verde. It might be finished. The truth is that when we start a war in Cape Verde, the Portuguese will become even more confronted from every side. Comrades, We can't repeat enough that the fundamental objective of our armed resistance is to realize that which we can't obtain only with politics. Thus, it's to open new perspectives for our people, in independence, in peace, in work, in justice, and for progress. We're convinced that it's our party that can do this. In the context of our people's destiny, which we ourselves are creating, in the context of the demands of our time's history, it's our party that has the mission, through political, economic, and cultural resistance, and acting forcefully and necessarily in the armed resistance, to open this new path for our people, to guarantee for our people the necessary security and the certainty that it will live in progress. That is our mission, comrades, particularly of those comrades who are attaining more responsibilities in our party every day.